The chains lay on the floor again. Locks opened. Links scattered like dead snakes across the concrete. I stood in the doorway of the basement, my body aching from another night spent God knows where. Frost clung to my boots. Mud caked the hem of my ranger uniform. 6 months. 6 months since Blackwood Forest. 6 months of running. 6 months of failing. I trudged to the small bathroom, bracing myself before looking in the mirror. Dark circles were in my eyes, deeper than yesterday. My once vibrant green eyes had dulled to the color of stagnant pond water. As I splashed cold water on my face, I noticed fresh markings on my forearm. Intricate spirals and angular symbols identical to those I'd seen in Northridge before. Everything went to hell. Not again. I whispered, scrubbing at them. They didn't fade. They never did. The coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen of my ranger cabinet, Whispering Pines National Park. I'd chosen this posting specifically 300 miles from Miller's Creek, isolated enough that when I finally lost control completely, maybe I wouldn't hurt anyone. The park administration had been desperate enough for winter staff that they hadn't looked too closely at why a ranger would request such a remote outpost. I pulled out my journal from its hiding place, a hollowed-out field guide to local plant life, and made another entry. Day 183. Woke in the forest again. Northeast quadrant judging by the terrain. Approximately 2 miles from cabin. Chains unlocked. New markings on left forearm. Identical pattern. To Northridge site. Voice stronger yesterday during Thompson Creek patrol. Lost 3 hours. Found myself completing incident reports I don't remember writing. The radio crackled, startling me. I knocked my coffee mug to the floor where it shattered, brown liquid seeping between the floorboards. Ranger Hayes, you copy? The voice belonged to Park Superintendent Garcia, checking in from the main office 30 miles south. I grabbed the handset. Hayes here, go ahead. Just checking your status before the storm rolls in. Forecast says we're looking at 8 inches by nightfall. Roads will be impassable for at least 3 days. I'm stocked up, should be fine. My voice sounded normal, steady, a lie. Good man, don't forget to log your patrols. Been missing some of your check-ins. I glanced at the stack of papers on my desk, reports filled with my handwriting that I had no memory of completing. Sorry about that. Radio's been spotty. Won't happen again. No problem. Just protocol. Stay safe up there, Hayes. Will do. Hayes out. I replaced the handset and leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. A familiar pressure built behind my eyes. Like something pushing outward from inside my skull. They're coming to find us soon. Whispered a voice that wasn't mine but used my vocal cords anyway. Winter will keep them. Feed them to us. Shut up. I hissed, pressing my palms against my temples. There's no us. Laughter echoed inside my head. A layered, multi-toned sound like dozens of voices speaking in unison. The smiling one. That's what the cult in Blackwood Forest had called it. The entity that had latched onto me during the investigation. That had hollowed me out from the inside. That was slowly taking control. I pushed away from the wall and grabbed my jacket. I needed to patrol. Needed routine. Needed to stay human for as long as possible. The forest welcomed me with silent, snow-laden branches. My breath fogged in the frigid air as I trudged along the hiking trail, checking markers and keeping watch for any foolhardy hikers who might have ignored the weather warnings. The physical exertion helped quiet the voice, at least temporarily. Hours later, I returned to find deer gathered around my cabin. 6 of them standing perfectly still, watching the building with unblinking eyes. They didn't scatter at my approach. Instead, they turned their heads in unison to stare at me. Get out of here, I shouted, waving my arms. The deer blinked simultaneously, then melted back into the forest with unnatural coordination. Inside, I found muddy paw prints crossing my floor, too small for deer, fox, maybe, or raccoon. Something had been in my cabin while I was away. I followed the prints to my desk where my journal lay open, though I'd hidden it before leaving. My hands trembled as I picked it up. New writing filled the page in my handwriting. The door is opening. We are becoming. Spring will bring the gathering. I slammed the journal shut and shoved it back into its hiding place. Night was falling, and with it, the storm. Snow already pelted against the windows as wind howled through the trees. Once I would have found the isolation comforting. Now it felt like a prison, or worse, like I was the warden of something that needed to be contained. In the basement, I prepared the chains again, securing them to the concrete support pillar. The ritual had become familiar. Lock the heavy manacles around my wrists and ankles. Hide the key on the highest shelf where I couldn't reach it while restrained. It never mattered. By morning I'd be free, standing somewhere in the forest, with no memory of how I got there. I won't let you win, I said to the empty air. Whatever you're planning, I'll stop it. You are the plan, came the reply, using my voice but twisting it into something wrong. You've always been the plan. I secured the last lock and sat on the cold floor, back against the pillar. Outside, the storm intensified. The wind seemed to whisper words just beyond comprehension. The animals would come again tonight, gathering in my windows, watching. They always did. As darkness fell completely, I felt the familiar sensation of something unfurling inside me, stretching through my body like fingers testing their reach. Behind my eyes, pressure built until I saw flashes of places I'd never been. Stone altars, ancient trees, faces twisted in worship or agony. I knew what would happen next. Blackness would take me and I'd wake somewhere else. The chains would be unlocked. New markings would adorn my skin. More time lost, more control slipping away. The first snow of winter battered the cabin above me. Soon the roads would be impassable. No one would come. No one would go. Isolation had seemed like safety when I'd requested this post. 3 days after the snowstorm, the chains lay empty on the basement floor again. I'd woken up beside a frozen creek, half a mile from my cabin, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. My uniform had been soaked through, ice crystallizing along the hems. It took an hour of huddling beside the fireplace before feeling returned to my extremities. I just finished changing into dry clothes when sharp knocks echoed through the cabin. My heart raced. No one should be able to reach me. The roads were supposed to be impassable. I opened the door to find Sheriff Catherine Reeves on my porch, snowflakes catching in her salt and pepper hair. Her cruiser was parked behind my truck, chains on the tires. "Sheriff," I said, trying to mask my surprise, "didn't expect visitors." Her piercing blue eyes scanned me from head to toe. "Our weekly check-in, Hayes, you forgot again?" I blinked. Weekly check-in. Was this another thing I'd agreed to during my blackouts? Right. "Sorry, come in." I stepped aside, desperately trying to remember if I'd hidden my journal and secured the basement door. Sheriff Reeves stomped snow from her boots and entered, her eyes sweeping across the cabin. Nothing escaped her notice. The coffee mug shards I'd missed cleaning up, the muddy footprints on the floor, the deep scratches on the inside of the door. "You look like hell, Connor," she said, removing her gloves. "When's the last time you slept?" "Last night." The lie came easily. "Really?" She stepped closer, studying my face. "Those circles under your eyes suggest otherwise." I moved toward the kitchen. "Coffee?" "Sure." My hands trembled as I filled the pot with water. The entity stirred behind my eyes, pressure building in my skull. "Roads cleared faster than expected," I said, trying to distract myself. County got the plows out early. We needed to. She leaned against the counter. We've got a situation. 3 hikers went missing 2 days ago. College students from Westlake. They were camping on Aspen Loop Trail. My stomach clenched. Aspen Loop was in my patrol zone, less than 4 miles from here. During the storm. That's suicide. They went up before the weather alert. Last check-in was Tuesday morning. She watched me carefully. Their emergency beacon activated yesterday, but the signal cut out after 10 minutes. We could find them for you, I heard myself say, but the voice wasn't quite mine. It had that layered quality, like multiple voices speaking at once. Sheriff Reeves frowned. What was that? I cleared my throat, fighting for control. I said I could help you find them. That's not. She shook her head. Never mind. My team's assembling at the trailhead in 30 minutes. I want you there. Of course. As she turned to leave, she paused. Connor, is everything okay with you? You seem different lately. Just tired. The isolation gets to you after a while. She nodded slowly. 30 minutes haze. Don't be late. The abandoned campsite looked wrong. Not just ransacked by wildlife or damaged by the storm. Wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. The 3 tents remained standing. Yet each had been meticulously turned inside out, like someone had peeled them. Their sleeping bags had been arranged in a perfect triangle, contents emptied but organized by color. What do you make of this? Sheriff Reeves asked, her breath fogging in the cold air. I crouched beside one of the sleeping bags. Not animals, too organized. Deputy Collins approached from the perimeter. No tracks leading away from camp. Not even the hiker's own footprints. Storm would have covered them, I suggested. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. I moved toward the center of the triangle formed by the sleeping bags. Something caught my eye. Small structures arranged in a circle. I knelt down for a closer look. They were twig dolls, about 6 inches tall, intricately woven with sinew and hair. Each had a different configuration of limbs. Some with too many, others with none at all. I picked one up, turning it over. In its chest cavity, nestled among dried leaves, were teeth. Human teeth. Sheriff, I called, my voice strained. You need to see this. She knelt beside me, pulling on a latex glove before taking the doll from my hands. Jesus Christ. I reached for another doll, tearing it open. More teeth, and another, and another. The 5th doll contained a single tooth, positioned where the heart would be. Recognition hit like a physical blow. It was my tooth, my right upper premolar that had been knocked out in a climbing accident when I was 19. I'd had a crown put in years ago, but that was impossible. My tongue found the crown in my mouth still firmly in place. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. The entity stirred within me, seemingly pleased. We told you they were coming. It whispered in my head. We arranged this welcome. Hayes, you okay? Sheriff Reeves was watching me, eyes narrowed. Fine, I managed, closing my fist around the tooth. Just disturbed. You recognize something? It wasn't a question. I shook my head. No. Just wondering what kind of person would do this. She studied me for a long moment before turning to address the search team. Fan out. 20-foot intervals. Look for any sign of the hikers. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I shoved them into my pockets, desperately trying to appear normal as I joined the search. An hour later, Deputy Collins called out from the eastern edge of the search area. We converged on his position to find him pointing at a large pine tree. Carved into the bark was a symbol. The same spiraling pattern that had appeared on my forearm after my blackouts. It seemed to pulse with its own energy. There's more, Collins said, gesturing ahead. They make a trail. Sure enough, every few trees bore similar markings, leading deeper into the forest. "We follow them," Sheriff Reeves ordered. As the team moved ahead, I stepped closer to the first marked tree. Something compelled me to touch the symbol. The moment my fingertips made contact, the carving seemed to shift beneath them. Like something living just below the surface of the bark, I jerked my hand back, heart hammering in my chest. "Connor," Sheriff Reeves called from ahead. "You coming?" I stared at the symbol, which now appeared completely normal. Just a carving in bark. "Yeah," I called back, my voice unsteady. "Right behind you." As I moved to follow, I caught my reflection in a patch of ice clinging to the tree trunk. For just a moment, my eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and my mouth stretched into a smile too wide for my face. I drove away from the campsite with the stolen tooth hidden in my pocket and dread building in my chest. My reflection caught in the rearview mirror showed a man I barely recognized. The brief flash of that unnatural smile at the campsite still haunting me. 2 hours later, I pulled into Northridge University's visitor parking. Professor Eliza Morgan had agreed to meet me after a desperate phone call where I claimed to need expert insight on a cultural artifact related to a park investigation. I hadn't mentioned the tooth, the dolls, or the fact that something was eating me alive from the inside. I checked my pocket for the 10th time, making sure the photos I'd taken of the twig dolls were still there, along with close-ups of the markings on my skin. Professor Morgan's office door stood ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the dim hallway. I knocked lightly. Come in. Please mind the stacks." Her voice was bright and energetic. I pushed the door open to find a room that looked like an academic tornado had touched down. Books towered in precarious columns. Display cases housed masks with creepy features. Shelves overflowed with artifacts, bone fragments, stone carvings, primitive tools, and what appeared to be dried plant specimens in labeled jars. The professor herself matched her surroundings, organized chaos. Wild gray curls escaped a messy bun, and reading glasses perched and used atop her head. Colorful scarves draped her shoulders despite the building's oppressive heating system. She looked up from her desk, ink stains visible on her fingers. Ranger Hayes, I presume. She stood navigating the maze of artifacts with practiced ease. "Professor Eliza Morgan, your call sounded urgent. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Academic curiosity is my weakness. You mentioned ritual artifacts?" Her eyes sparkled with intellectual hunger. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photos. These were found at a campsite where 3 hikers disappeared during the storm. She took the phone, her expression shifting from excited to disturbed as she swiped through images of the twig dolls. "And there's more." I rolled up my sleeve, revealing the spiraling symbols etched into my skin. "These markings, they're connected. I need to understand what they mean." Professor Morgan's eyes widened. She carefully placed my phone on her desk and retrieved a magnifying glass from a cluttered drawer. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to my arm. I nodded, extending my arm across her desk. She examined the markings in silence, occasionally making small sounds of recognition or concern. "How long have you had these?" she finally asked. 6 months. They started after an investigation in Blackwood Forest. She sat back, removing her reading glasses from atop her head to actually use them, peering intently at my face. "You've heard of the Carter family from Miller's Creek?" My blood ran cold. "Yes. They were connected to ritualistic murders 20 years ago. Much older than that." She turned to a filing cabinet, yanking open a drawer with practiced efficiency. "The Carters have been in that region for over 200 years, though they've gone by different names throughout the generations." She extracted a worn folder and spread several photographs across her desk. They showed cave paintings, stone tablets, and ancient pottery, all bearing symbols identical to those on my skin. "What you're marked with, Ranger Hayes, is very old. It's connected to an entity some texts call the Smiling One, a being that exists between dimensions, constantly seeking full manifestation in our world." My mouth went dry. "How does it manifest?" 3 phases, according to the texts. She held up one finger. First, finding a vessel through ritual marking. The vessel is prepared through exposure to specific artifacts, usually followed by burning them. The burning completes the connection. I remember the twig dolls I gathered as evidence, how they inexplicably caught fire in my truck on the drive back to my cabin. I'd assumed I'd dropped a cigarette. The second phase, she continued, another finger, involves consuming the life force of 9 specific individuals, each representing different aspects of human existence. The disappearances you mentioned may be connected to this. The pressure behind my eyes intensified. I gripped the edge of her desk. And the third, I managed to ask. A willing sacrifice at the binding site. A place where the veil between dimensions is thinnest. This completes the manifestation, allowing the entity to fully exist in our world. She pulled out another file. This one containing newspaper clippings. The Carter family has orchestrated these rituals for generations. They serve as shepherds, guiding the entity's manifestation. The most recent known member is Abigail Carter, though she likely goes by another name now. The entity inside me surged, clawing at my consciousness. My vision blurred, replaced by flashes of a young woman with unnaturally pale skin and a too white smile. Abby knows us. Abby prepares the way. The voice whispered inside my head. I doubled over, fighting for control. Ranger Hayes, are you all right? Professor Morgan's voice seemed distant. With tremendous effort, I straightened. I'm fine, just tired. Her expression showed she didn't believe me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying my face with new intensity. Your eyes, she said quietly. They changed color just now. A trick of the light, I lied, even as I felt the entity receding. Satisfied with what it had learned. Professor Morgan nodded slowly, then turned to adjust a small statue on her bookshelf. I didn't notice the red recording light until she stepped away. Is that a camera? I asked, tension creeping into my voice. Standard procedure when examining artifacts, she replied smoothly. University policy for documentation. We both knew it was a lie, but I didn't challenge her. Instead, I gathered the photos, rolling my sleeve down to hide the markings. Thank you for your insights, Professor. This has been educational. Ranger Hayes. Her voice stopped me at the door. Whatever is happening to you, it isn't too late to stop it. The text suggests the vessel can reject the entity before the third phase. But it requires tremendous willpower. I nodded without turning. I'll keep that in mind. The drive back to Whispering Pines felt endless. Snow began falling again, fat flakes swirling in my headlights. I flicked on the radio for distraction, settling on a new station. Halfway through a weather report, the station changed by itself, static giving way to music. An old folk tune played, something about smiling in the dark. I pressed the scan button, finding another station. Seconds later, the same song began playing again. I hit the power button. The radio remained on. Smile when the darkness comes, smile when they call your name. I punched the dashboard, pain shooting through my knuckles. The music continued, uninterrupted. Smile as the shadows grow, never to be the same. For the rest of the drive, the song played on repeat. No matter what buttons I pressed. The entity hummed along inside my head, seeming to know every word by heart. The drive back from Professor Morgan's office left me drained. The radio's haunting folk song still echoing in my mind as I pulled into the Whispering Pine Sheriff Station. Snow continued to fall in lazy flakes, dusting my jacket as I trudged toward the entrance. Sheriff Reeves had called an hour ago. Need you at the station? New developments on those missing hikers. The fluorescent lights of the station buzzed overhead as I stepped inside, their harsh glow making my headache worse. The entity had been restless since my meeting with Professor Morgan, pushing against my consciousness like waves testing a dam for weakness. Sheriff Reeves stood by the front desk reviewing a stack of papers. She looked up as I entered, those piercing blue eyes missing nothing. Hayes. You look like hell, she said with no warmth in her voice. Nice to see you too, Sheriff. I attempted a smile that felt more like a grimace. What's this about the hikers? Not just the hikers anymore. She gestured toward her office. We've got company from Millers Creek PD. My pulse quickened at the mention of Millers Creek. A man in a deputy's uniform stood examining a map on the wall, his back to us. When he turned, I recognized Deputy Marcus Collins from the search party earlier. Ranger Hayes, he said with a nod, his expression carefully neutral. Good to see you again. Something about his flat brown eyes made my skin crawl. They revealed nothing like looking at painted glass. Deputy Collins has jurisdiction over a case that might be connected to our missing hikers. Sheriff Reeves explained, settling behind her desk. She gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs opposite her. I lowered myself into the seat, keeping my posture deliberately casual. What kind of connection? Collins pulled a file from his bag and placed it on the desk between us. 2 bodies were discovered yesterday in an abandoned mining shaft outside Millers Creek. Evan and Laura Carter. The name sent a jolt through me. Inside my head, the entity stirred, suddenly alert. The Carters, I repeated, fighting to keep my voice steady. Collins opened the file, revealing crime scene photos that made my stomach lurch. The bodies had been arranged in a perfect circle, facing upward with arms and legs splayed in a star pattern. Their mouths were fixed in grotesque, 2 white smiles. Most disturbing of all, their teeth had been removed. Every single one. Jesus, I whispered, looking away. Sheriff Reeves pushed another photo forward. Look familiar? It showed symbols carved into the rock wall surrounding the bodies, the same spiraling patterns etched into my skin, the same markings we'd found on the trees near the hikers' campsite. My arm burned beneath my sleeve as if the symbols were being carved anew. We've seen these before. I acknowledged, careful not to reveal too much. There's more, Collins said, pulling out another file. Abby Carter, their daughter, is missing. No sign of her at the scene or their residence. He placed a 3rd file on the desk. Older, the edges worn and yellowed with age. The label read, Tanner J., Personal Investigation, Carter Family, 1978. 2022, Sheriff James Tanner Collins explained my predecessor. He supposedly committed suicide 3 months ago, but I found this hidden in his home while clearing his effects. Sheriff Reeves opened the inside were decades of notes, photographs, and newspaper clippings, all related to the Carter family. Tanner had been investigating them for over 40 years. Collins continued. He believed they were part of a cult dating back centuries. They called themselves the Eternal Smile. The pressure behind my eyes intensified, becoming almost unbearable. The entity surged forward with such force that I gasped, gripping the arms of my chair. According to Tanner's notes, Collins said, seemingly oblivious to my distress, the cult worshipped an entity they believed existed between dimensions. They performed rituals to help it manifest in our world. He knows too much. The entity roared inside my head, its voice a cacophony of overlapping tones. He'll ruin everything. Hayes? Sheriff Reeves was looking at me with concern. You okay? I tried to respond, but my throat constricted. The room began to spin, darkness encroaching at the edges of my vision. I felt myself falling. My body no longer under my control. He's seizing. Sheriff Reeves' voice seemed to come from miles away. Collins. Help me get him on his side. As hands grabbed me, the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of fractured images. I was no longer in the sheriff's station. I stood in a clearing in a forest I didn't recognize. A stone altar dominated the center, surrounded by hooded figures holding torches. Their faces were obscured except for their mouths, each stretched into an identical, unnatural smile. A young girl, perhaps 8 or 9, stood at the edge of the circle. Her skin was unnaturally pale, her dark hair hanging limply around her face. She didn't wear a hood, but her expression mirrored the adults. That same terrible smile. On the altar lay a boy, no older than 12. His eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down his face. The hooded figures began to chant, their voices merging into a single layered sound. The vessel accepts. The door will open. The smiling one comes. One of the figures stepped forward, raising a curved knife. "Watch closely, Abby," the figure said, turning to the young girl. "One day you will perform this sacred duty." Abby's smile widened as she watched her brother scream, the knife descending in a terrible arc. I jerked awake with a ragged gasp, disoriented and drenched in cold sweat. I was lying on a worn couch in what appeared to be the station's break room. Sheriff Reeves sat across from me, a foam cup of coffee cooling in her hands. Her expression was guarded, her posture tense. "Welcome back," she said. No warmth in her voice. "You've been out for almost 40 minutes. I struggled to sit up, my limbs heavy and uncooperative. "What happened? You tell me." She leaned forward. "One minute you're fine, the next you're on the floor, convulsing and speaking in." She hesitated, speaking in multiple voices at once. My blood ran cold. "What did I say?" Nothing coherent. She studied me intently. "What's your connection to the Carters, Hayes?" "I don't have one," I replied too quickly. "Then why did you react that way when Collins mentioned them? Why did you mutter the name Abby repeatedly while unconscious?" I swallowed hard, my throat painfully dry. "I don't know." Sheriff Reeves set her coffee down with deliberate care. "I've known you 6 months, Connor. You're a good ranger, dedicated. But lately something's off. The sleepwalking. The memory lapses. The physical changes." Her eyes narrowed. "Your eyes aren't even the same color anymore." I looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I'm just tired. Stressed." "Bullshit." The word came out sharp as a knife. "I've seen your medical report from last month's physical. Elevated heart rate, abnormal brain activity, unexplained markings on your skin. The doctor recommended psychiatric evaluation." "It's nothing," I insisted. "Nothing doesn't cause seizures." She stood up. "I'm putting you on administrative leave, effective immediately. Get help, Hayes. Real help." The door opened, and Deputy Collins entered. He'd removed his jacket and I noticed something protruding from his shirt pocket. A small twig figure, similar to the dolls we'd found at the campsite. My heart hammered against my ribs. "How are you feeling, Ranger?" Collins asked, his voice neutral. His hand rested casually near his holstered weapon, a gesture that seemed deliberately calculated. "Better," I lied. "Just exhausted." I think Collins nodded, his eyes revealing nothing. The bodies of the mining shaft, they were positioned exactly like this. He made a star shape with his arms. Ritual positioning. Tanner's notes called it the doorway configuration. Sheriff Reeves shot him a warning look. "That's enough, Collins. Hayes needs rest." "Of course." Collins stepped back, but his eyes remained fixed on me. "Just thought he should know what we're dealing with." I stood carefully, using the arm of the couch for support. I should get home before the roads get worse. Sheriff Reeves didn't try to stop me. "We'll talk tomorrow, Hayes. After you've rested." I nodded, avoiding eye contact with both of them as I gathered my jacket. As I reached the door, Collins spoke again. "Strange about those teeth, isn't it? All removed, yet none found at the scene." I paused, the tooth in my pocket feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Strange," I agreed, then fled before they could see the panic in my eyes. Night had fallen by the time I left the station, the snow illuminated by my headlights as I drove slowly back toward my cabin. My mind raced with everything I'd learned. Carter's, the Eternal Smile cult, Sheriff Tanner's decades-long investigation, and that vision of young Abby watching her brother's sacrifice. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed it. Deputy Collins' patrol car parked on a secluded forest road, headlights off. I slowed, pulling over behind a stand of trees. Collins stood beside his vehicle, a satellite phone pressed to his ear. In his other hand, He held what looked like a map. Even from this distance, I recognized the outline of Blackwood Forest, the place where my nightmare had begun 6 months ago. I killed my engine rolling down my window to listen. Collins's voice carried in the still night air. Found Hayes, just like you said, he's the vessel. No question. The markings match. A pause. Yes, the symbols are identical to the altar stones. Another longer pause. I understand. The spring equinox. That gives us 3 months to prepare the site. He folded the map. Don't worry about Sheriff Reeves. She suspects something's wrong with Hayes, but she doesn't know what. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. Inside my head, the entity purred with satisfaction. For once, we were in perfect agreement. Deputy Collins was not what he appeared to be. Deputy Collins' conversation faded behind me as I sped toward my cabin, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The cabin appeared through the trees after far too long. I barely remembered parking, stumbling up the porch steps, fumbling with keys that wouldn't stop shaking in my grip. Once inside, I collapsed against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. The conversation I'd overheard replayed in my mind. The vessel, the spring equinox, 3 months to prepare the site. What are you doing to me? I whispered to the presence inside me. Becoming. We are becoming. Pain lanced through my skull, bright and sharp. I clutched my head, a cry escaping my lips as visions flashed before my eyes. Northridge Trail at night, the stone formations in the moonlight, the restricted section of Blackwood Forest, where the first body had been found 6 months ago. A clearing with an ancient altar stone, surrounded by hooded figures, a girl with a too-white smile watching from the shadows, the visions intensified, more detailed than ever before. I could smell pine needles, feel the rough texture of bark against my fingertips and hear whispered chants rising from the altar. Stop it! I shouted, slamming my palm against the wall. The wood splintered beneath my hand, leaving a crater in the paneling. I stared at it. Then at my hand. No pain. No blood. Just a faint pulsing glow in the veins beneath my skin. I rose. Legs steadier than they had any right to be. Outside the window, 3 deer stood watching the cabin. When I raised my hand, they moved in perfect unison, stepping closer to the glass. They hear us now. The voice purred inside my head. All the forest creatures. They serve us. My vision shifted and the dim cabin suddenly illuminated as if in daylight. I could see every detail with perfect clarity. Dust particles suspended in the air, the microscopic cracks in the wooden beams overhead, a spider building its web in the far corner. Power surged through me, a dark tide washing away my fatigue. My muscles coiled with tension, strength beyond anything human flowing through them. What is this? I gasped. Gifts, the entity replied. To prepare the vessel. To complete our becoming. Rage exploded within me. At the entity, at my own weakness, at the inevitable loss of control, I lashed out, grabbing the nearest chair and hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall like it was made of twigs. The coffee table followed, splitting in two when my foot connected with it. I tore through the cabin, destroying everything in my path with impossible strength. The couch ripped apart in my hands. Shelves snapped from the walls. I stood in the wreckage, panting, surrounded by destruction. This strength wasn't mine. These abilities weren't mine. I was becoming something else. Something monstrous. I won't let you win, I growled. In frustration, I slammed my fist against the floor. The sound that echoed back wasn't the solid thunk of wood, but a hollow, resonant thump. I froze, listening. I struck the floor again, moving a few feet to the side. Solid. Back to the first spot. Hollow. I dropped to my knees, pushing aside the remnants of the shredded rug. The floorboards looked identical to the others, but when I pressed my enhanced vision focused on subtle differences, hairline seams forming a perfect square. My fingers found an almost invisible gap. I dug my nails in and pulled. The trapdoor lifted with surprising ease, revealing a set of stone steps descending into darkness. A sickeningly familiar smell wafted up from below, the same earthy metallic scent I'd encountered at the hiker's campsite. "Home," whispered the entity. "Our sanctuary." I didn't need a flashlight. My enhanced vision pierced the darkness as I descended the stairs. One careful step at a time. Recognition dawned slowly. These walls matched the stone construction from my visions. The same distinctive chisel marks, the same patterns in the rock. The passage opened into a circular chamber and my heart stopped. There they were, the three missing hikers. They sat with backs against the wall arranged in a triangle. Their skin had taken on an unhealthy paleness. Eyes half-lidded, mouths fixed in slight vacant smiles, tubes of some organic material connected to their arms and necks, pulsing slowly with a faint bluish light. The tubes converged at the center of the room, disappearing into the floor. "Hey," I called, rushing forward. "Can you hear me?" None responded. Their eyes didn't track my movement. They seemed to be looking through me at something only they could see. I knelt beside the nearest one, a young woman with matted blonde hair. Her pulse was weak but steady. She lived, yet her life force visibly drained through the tubes, feeding something beneath the chamber. "They nourish us," the entity explained, its voice almost gentle. "Their essence builds our strength. 3 more will join before the spring. Then 3 more, the 9 sacrifices to open the door." Horror crashed over me. "You chose this cabin because of this chamber. You knew it was here all along. We have known for centuries. Our faithful built it. We guided you here when you ran from Blackwood Forest, the perfect vessel seeking the perfect refuge." I grabbed at the tubes connected to the woman, trying to pull them free. My hands wouldn't cooperate. They hovered inches from the pulsing conduits, shaking with the effort to move those final inches. "No," I choked out. "I won't let you do this." My body betrayed me. Instead of helping the hikers, I found myself kneeling at the center of their triangle. My hands formed unfamiliar gestures, words spilled from my lips in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. An incantation to deepen their trance, to make their essence flow more freely. The tubes pulsed brighter. The hikers' smiles widened a fraction. "You cannot stop what is already happening," the entity said. "Your knowledge serves us. Your ranger skills find the perfect victims. Your survival training keeps them alive longer, so we may feed longer." I fought with everything I had, trying to regain control of my limbs. Sweat beat on my forehead from the effort. For an instant, just an instant, I broke through. My hand shot out, grasping one of the tubes. Light hot pain seared through my arm. Vision slammed into me, the altar stone again, blood flowing into carved channels, 9 bodies arranged in a circle, a door opening in reality itself. Something vast and ancient pushing through. I collapsed, gasping, as the entity reasserted control. My body rose without my permission. I watched my hands check the hikers' pulses with professional efficiency, adjust the tubes with horrifying precision. Ranger training perverted to serve something inhuman. "We will care for them," the entity assured me. "Their strength becomes our strength. Their life becomes our life. By spring, we will be ready." "For what?" I managed to ask, though my lips barely moved. "For our complete manifestation. For the door to open fully. For the smiling one to walk the world again." I stared at the hikers, their expressions frozen in those slight dreamy smiles. They couldn't see me. Couldn't hear me. They were trapped in visions the entity fed them, just as I was trapped in my own body. "I'll stop you," I whispered, though I had no idea how. "I'll find a way." The entity's laughter echoed inside my skull, a chorus of overlapping voices. "You cannot stop what you are becoming, Connor Hayes. You will smile when the darkness comes." My own face reflected in a pool of water on the chamber floor, eyes glowing with unnatural light, mouth stretched in a smile too large for any human face. 2 days had passed since my discovery of the hidden chamber beneath my cabin. 2 days of fighting for control against the entity inside me as its influence grew stronger. When Sheriff Reeves called to organize another search party for the missing hikers, I almost refused. I knew where they truly were. Trapped in that chamber, their life force being drained. But the entity wouldn't let me speak the truth. The morning dawned with a brittle chill. Frost clung to the trees and crunched beneath our boots as we gathered at the trailhead. "All right, listen up," she called to the assembled volunteers. "We're expanding our search grid today. These kids have been missing for almost a week now. If they're still out here..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Deputy Collins stood beside her, his expression carefully blank. The twig doll I'd noticed before was absent from his pocket, but something about the way his eyes tracked me made my skin crawl. "Hayes," Sheriff Reeves motioned me over. "You're with Team 3, Eastern Quadrant. You know that terrain better than anyone." I nodded, trying to appear normal despite the pressure building behind my eyes. "We'll find them," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "I hope so." Her gaze lingered on my face. "You look different today." Before I could respond, she turned away to assign the remaining teams. I joined my group, a mix of park staff and local volunteers, all grim-faced and determined. We set off into the forest, spreading out into our search formation. An hour into the search, I noticed the first symbol. It appeared on an ancient oak tree carved deep into the bark, the same spiraling pattern etched on my skin. It seemed to pulse with a faint bluish glow. I stopped, staring at it. "You see something?" called one of the volunteers, a middle-aged man whose name I'd already forgotten. I pointed at the tree. "This marking could be a trail sign." He approached the tree. "What marking?" I looked at him, then back at the symbol. It glowed more intensely now, practically vibrating with energy. "Right here," I insisted, tracing the outline with my finger. He shook his head. "Nothing there, man. Just old bark." A chill ran through me. Either I was hallucinating or the symbols were meant only for me. The entity stirred inside, pleased by this realization. "My mistake," I muttered. "Let's keep moving." But more symbols appeared as we continued, each one visible only to me. They formed a clear path, leading away from our designated search area. An overwhelming compulsion to follow them grew with each step. "I think I see something," I lied to my team. "I'll check it out in radio if I find anything." Before anyone could object, I moved toward the nearest symbol, drawn by its pulsing light. The further I walked, the stronger the pull became. Behind me, the voices of my search team faded. I should have felt alarmed, but a strange calm settled over me instead. This was inevitable. This was destined. The symbols led me deeper into the forest, into areas I'd never patrolled. The trees grew older here, more primeval. Moss hung in thick curtains from ancient branches. The ground sloped gradually downward into a natural depression. I realized with a start that the forest had gone completely silent. No bird song, no rustling leaves, no scurrying animals. Even the wind seemed to die at the edge of this place. At the center of the depression stood a stone altar, weathered by centuries of exposure yet still bearing intricate carvings along its sides. The same spiraling symbols that had led me here. The altar stone sat in the middle of a perfectly circular clearing where nothing grew. The ground bare and oddly smooth. A figure knelt before the altar, head bowed over an open book. Even from behind I recognized her. The pale skin, the long dark hair. The unnatural stillness of her posture. Abby Carter. She didn't turn as I approached, yet she spoke as if she'd been expecting me. "The vessel arrives," she said, her voice oddly melodic. "Right on time." I stopped several feet away. "You're Abby Carter." She rose fluidly and turned to face me. Her smile stretched too wide across her face, revealing perfect teeth. A mirror image of the expression I'd seen on my own face during my blackouts. "I am Abby," she confirmed, "one of many names I've worn." Her eyes held ancient knowledge that contradicted her youthful appearance. She gestured to the book open on the altar, bound in what appeared to be human skin, its pages yellowed with age. "You have questions," she said. "The answers are here, as they have always been." I took a step closer, drawn by morbid curiosity and the entity's hunger for knowledge. "What is this place?" I asked. "A binding site," she replied. "One of 7 across this continent. Places where the veil between dimensions wears thin. Where the smiling one can reach through." She ran her fingers lovingly over the book's pages. "My parents failed in their duty. They were meant to prepare you. Properly, gradually. Instead, they grew afraid. They tried to stop what cannot be stopped." "Your parents," I said. "The bodies and the mineshaft." Her smile didn't falter. "They served their purpose until fear overcame devotion. They forgot that I am not merely their daughter." Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I am an extension of the smiling one's will. Born of the previous vessel, as all shepherds are." The implication hit me. "You're saying you're not human." "Not entirely," she agreed, "just as you're becoming something more than human." She stepped aside, gesturing for me to approach the altar. Against my better judgment, I did. The book lay open to pages covered in symbols identical to those on my skin. Accompanied by text in a language I'd never seen yet somehow understood. "You were chosen long ago," Abby said as I stared at the pages. "When you were 8 years old you crossed through ritual grounds in Blackwood Forest. Do you remember?" Memories surfaced, a family camping trip, wandering away from our site, finding strange stones arranged in a circle. The sudden headache that had lasted for days afterward. "You were marked then," she continued. "The entity guided your path, your interest in forestry, your assignment to Blackwood, your discovery of the first sacrifice, all orchestrated to bring you here now." My hands trembled as I turned a page in the ancient book. "The Ikers," I said, "the twig dolls. What do they mean?" "The 9 sacrifices form the key," she explained. "The dolls form a map when properly assembled, a map to this binding site. Each sacrifice marks a point of power. Each life strengthens the vessel." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a twig doll similar to those I'd found at the campsite, offering it to me. "Take it," she urged. "Complete your collection. Find the pattern." I accepted it, feeling a rush of connection as my fingers closed around the crude figure. The entity surged within me, recognizing something familiar in this offering. "I've been fighting this," I admitted, my voice hardly sounding like my own. "Trying to stop it." Abby's expression softened with what looked almost like compassion. "Fighting only causes pain. The change is inevitable. You were chosen because you are strong enough to contain what comes next." She closed the book and lifted it from the altar, holding it out to me. "Take this too. Learn what you must become. Prepare for the final phase at the spring equinox." As I reached for the book, our fingers brushed. A jolt of recognition passed between us, a shared awareness of the entity's presence. For a moment, I saw her true nature beneath the human disguise. Something ancient and patient, wearing flesh like a borrowed coat. Yet rather than fear, I felt a strange kinship. She was like me, or rather I was becoming like her. A vessel, a doorway. "They'll be looking for me," I said, clutching the book to my chest. "Then go," she replied. "We'll meet again when the time is right. When the 9th sacrifice is prepared." I turned to leave, then paused. "Sheriff Reeves, she suspects something." Abby's smile widened impossibly further. "The sheriff has her role to play as well. All paths lead to the binding site. All players move toward their destined positions." The book felt warm against my chest as I made my way back through the forest, following the glowing symbols in reverse. The entity hummed with satisfaction inside me, pleased with our acquisition. I should have been terrified of what awaited me. Instead, I felt an unnatural calm settling over me. The forest sounds returned gradually as I left the binding site behind. In the distance, I heard my name being called, the search party looking for their lost member. I tucked the book inside my jacket and straightened my posture. As I rejoined the normal world, I practiced a normal expression, pushing down the smile that threatened to stretch too wide across my face. The book burned against my chest now as I drove back to my cabin, its ancient knowledge calling to me. I'd managed to rejoin the search party with a lie about following a false trail, but Sheriff Reeves's suspicious gaze had followed me for the remainder of the afternoon. Now, alone in my truck, with darkness falling, I pulled the book from my jacket and placed it on the passenger seat. I barely recognized my own hands on the steering wheel, the skin pale, veins pulsing with that unnatural blue light. My transformation was accelerating. When I reached the cabin, I found Abby waiting on the porch, still as a statue. No breath clouded the air in front of her despite the frigid temperature. "It's time," she said simply. I nodded, unable to resist the pull of what was coming next. Blackwood Forest, North Ridge, the binding site awaits. Within an hour, we were on the road in my Ranger vehicle. The ancient book between us on the console. The entity had grown stronger since our meeting at the altar, pushing my consciousness further into the background. I watched through my own eyes as my body operated the vehicle on its own. "Tell me," my voice said, though I hadn't formed the words. "Tell me what you remember of before." Abby turned to me, recognition flashing in her eyes. She wasn't speaking to me, but to the thing inside me. "Fragments only," she replied. "The void between dimensions, the hunger, the patience." My mouth moved again. The entity now speaking freely through me. "We waited so long watching through cracks in reality, learning your languages, your fears, your weaknesses. The faithful kept your memory alive." Abby said, generation after generation. A laugh escaped my throat, a terrible layered sound of multiple voices speaking in unison. Humans so eager to worship what they don't understand. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I fought for control, managing only to turn my head slightly toward the passenger window. Outside, a herd of deer bolted from the tree line as we passed, fleeing in terror. Further down, a group of crows took flight from a telephone wire, their wings beating frantically against the evening sky. "They sense you growing stronger," Abby observed. "They should fear us," my voice replied. "We will reshape this natural world into something more beautiful, more honest." "How?" I forced the word through clenched teeth, briefly wresting control of my own vocal cords. The entity paused, perhaps surprised by my resistance. Then it answered, using my voice, but with that unsettling chorus effect underlying each word. "Your world is built on lies, creatures pretending to be separate from one another, individual, independent. We will show the truth that all life is connected. One consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms. By destroying everything," I managed to say. "By transforming everything," it corrected. "The 9 sacrifices open the door. What comes through will unmake the boundaries between minds, between bodies, between dimensions." I lost control again as we continued driving through the night. For hours, the entity spoke through me. Revealing its ancient origins, it described watching Earth form from cosmic dust, waiting as life evolved, testing the boundaries between worlds when primitive humans first developed consciousness capable of perception beyond the physical. The first vessel was a shaman who saw power beyond human understanding, my mouth explained to Abby. He welcomed us, but his form was too weak. We learned from this failure. Each attempted manifestation taught us more about human biology, human psychology, human weakness. We stopped twice for gas. Each time I noticed how the station attendant stared at me with uneasy expressions. At the second stop, a young woman backed away when I approached the counter, her eyes widening at whatever she saw in my face. "Your appearance is changing more rapidly now," Abby commented as we returned to the vehicle. "The vessel is adapting." I caught a glimpse of myself in the side mirror, my skin paper white, eyes sunken and glowing with that eerie light. My smile stretched too wide, teeth looking somehow sharper, more numerous than before. "How much of me will be left?" I asked during a rare moment of control. Abby's expression almost looked pitying. "Enough to remember being human. The perfect vessel retains humanity while transcending it." Night had fallen completely by the time we reached the borders of Blackwood Forest. The entity guided my hands on the wheel, turning onto unmarked Forest Service roads, then eventually off-road entirely. We jolted along a barely visible trail until finally stopping at the base of North Ridge. "We walk from here," Abby said, gathering the book. I emerged from the vehicle, my movements no longer entirely my own. The forest around us had gone silent. No insects chirping, no nocturnal animals calling. My enhanced vision pierced the darkness, revealing the path ahead clearly. We climbed for nearly an hour, following glowing symbols visible only to us. The forest grew more primeval as we ascended. The trees ancient and twisted, their branches reaching toward us like gnarled fingers. Near the summit, Abby stopped abruptly. "The Guardian," she said, pointing to a massive oak with a hollow center. I approached, drawn by a familiar smell, that same earthy metallic scent from the chamber beneath my cabin. Inside the hollow trunk sat a preserved corpse, positioned upright as if keeping watch. The body wore the tattered remains of a sheriff's uniform, the badge still pinned to the chest. Sheriff James Tanner. His skin had the same waxy preserved appearance as the hikers in my basement. His mouth was fixed in that same terrible smile. And like the carters in the mine shaft, every tooth had been removed from his gaping mouth. He discovered too much, Abby explained. Fought too hard against his role. So he became the Guardian instead of the messenger. Collins' predecessor, I said, recognizing the name from the files. He investigated the Carters for decades. Abby nodded. His sacrifice strengthened the binding site. His essence feeds the soil. She reached out, touching the corpse's cheek with something like affection. All who resist eventually serve. We continued to the summit. There, bathed in moonlight, stood the same altar I'd seen in my visions. Stone circles surrounded it, arranged in intricate patterns. A circle of ash marked the ground where ritual fires had burned. "The final sacrifice approaches," Abby said, opening the ancient book. "Deputy Collins brings what we need." "What sacrifice?" I forced the question through my increasingly unresponsive lips. She looked up from the pages, her eyes reflecting starlight. "The ninth offering must be someone you truly care about. Someone with a connection to your soul. Their sacrifice completes the vessel's transformation. Opens the door fully." Horror washed through me. "Who?" "You know who," she replied. "The one who suspects but still hopes to save you. Sheriff Reeves." The realization hit me like a physical blow. I fought against the entity with renewed desperation, clawing for control of my own body. For a brief moment, I broke through. "I won't let you hurt her," I gasped, my voice sounding like my own again. Abby didn't seem concerned by my resistance. The vessel always fights hardest at the end. It changes nothing. She handed me the book, opened to pages showing detailed diagrams of the ritual site. Despite my struggle, my body began following the instructions, arranging stones in specific patterns, creating a circle of twig dolls around the altar, preparing the site for what was to come. As I worked, I noticed something about the altar stone itself. 9 small depressions had been carved into its surface in a specific pattern. When I placed the tooth I'd taken from the campsite into one of these depressions, it fit perfectly. "The 9 teeth," I said, understanding dawning. "They form a key." Abby nodded, pleased. "The key that unlocks the door. 8 have been collected. The 9th will complete it." I continued preparing the site, all while fighting for control, searching desperately for some weakness in the ceremony. The book described each step in precise detail, but certain passages seemed deliberately obscured, as if some knowledge was being withheld even from the vessel. Night deepened around us. The forest had grown unnaturally still. The trees seemed to bend inward toward the clearing, their branches creating a cathedral-like dome above the altar. They were watching, waiting. In the distance I heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. Then footsteps on the path below. Multiple sets. "He comes," Abby said, smiling that terrible smile. "And he brings your sheriff. The 9th sacrifice approaches." I stared down at my hands, arranging the final stones in their pattern. Though I appeared to be following the entity's will, I focused on a single thought. I would find a way to stop this, if not to save myself, then to save Catherine Reeves. The entity detected my resistance and laughed using my voice, that chorus of overlapping tones echoing across the clearing. "You cannot stop what is already in motion," it said through my smiling mouth. The door opens, the smiling one comes. I fought for control of my own hands as they arranged the final stones around the altar. Abby stood nearby, her smile gleaming in the moonlight as she watched my internal struggle with detached fascination. My ears caught the sound first. Tires on the rough forest road below, then car doors slamming. Multiple sets of footsteps began ascending the trail toward our clearing, crushing leaves and snapping twigs. "He comes," Abby said, her voice carrying unnatural harmonics. "And he brings what we need. The ninth sacrifice approaches." I fought harder against the entity, managing to slow my movements slightly as I placed the eighth tooth and its depression on the altar stone. My body trembled with the effort, sweat beading on my unnaturally pale skin despite the cold night air. "They're early," I managed to say with my own voice. "The ritual isn't complete." Abby's eyes flickered to mine, recognizing the moment of control I'd seized. "It matters not. The vessel fights, but cannot win." The footsteps grew louder. Two people, one moving confidently, the other stumbling, being dragged along. A branch snapped, followed by a woman's voice. "This is madness, Collins. You can't possibly believe silence." Deputy Collins' voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. They emerged into the clearing. Collins had changed from his uniform into dark robes embroidered with the spiraling symbols. His face was painted with markings that matched those carved into my skin. In one hand, he held a ceremonial knife with a curved blade. With his other, he roughly guided Professor Morgan, her hands bound with thick rope. My heart plummeted. I'd expected Sheriff Reeves. The entity had made me believe she would be the ninth sacrifice. But now Professor Morgan's terrified eyes met mine across the clearing, widening in horror at what she saw. "Connor," she whispered, her voice breaking. I wanted to respond, to tell her to run, but the entity surged forward, reclaiming control of my vocal cords. My mouth stretched into that terrible smile. "The vessel welcomes you, Professor," the entity said through me, its layered voice echoing in the still night air. "Your knowledge has served us well. Now your essence will complete our becoming." Collins shoved Professor Morgan forward, causing her to stumble and fall to her knees before the altar. He bowed deeply toward me. No, toward the thing inside me. "High Shepherd," he addressed me formally. "I bring the ninth sacrifice as promised. The woman who sought to interfere with your manifestation." Abby approached Collins, taking the ritual knife from his hands. "You have served faithfully, messenger. The eternal smile welcomes your devotion." Professor Morgan looked between us, her initial fear hardening into something else. Determination. Despite her bound hands, she straightened her spine, meeting my gaze directly. "Connor," she said firmly, "remember our conversation in my office about the entity's requirements?" The entity hissed inside my skull, trying to block her words, but I clung to them desperately. The texts were clear. She continued quickly. "The final sacrifice must be willing. That's why they've always used cult members in the past. The door cannot open unless..." Collins struck her across the face, silencing her enough. Blood trickled from Professor Morgan's split lip, but her eyes never left mine. In them, I saw not just fear, but recognition. She could still see me fighting inside this transforming body. The entity roared within me, rage building at her defiance. My body stepped forward, hand outstretched to receive the ritual knife from Abby. The ninth tooth, extracted from Sheriff Tanner's corpse, sat ready in my pocket. "The time has come," Abby intoned, placing the knife in my trembling hand. "Complete the circle. Open the door. Let the smiling one walk among us." I stood over Professor Morgan, knife raised, my body no longer my own. The entity pushed me to strike, to complete what had started centuries ago. But Professor Morgan's words had sparked something, a realization. Possible way out, willing. The sacrifice had to be willing. The entity couldn't force the final offering. It needed consent. True, genuine sacrifice. That was why it had manipulated events, trying to make me believe Sheriff Reeves would be the victim. It knew I cared for her, knew that part of me might sacrifice myself to save her. In that moment of clarity, I gathered every fragment of humanity I had left. With monumental effort, I changed the knife's trajectory. Instead of plunging into Professor Morgan's heart, I drove the blade into my own chest. No! Abby shrieked, the sound inhuman. Hot blood poured down my chest as I staggered backward. The entity thrashed wildly inside me, its control weakening as my life essence drained. I fell against the altar stone. Blood spilling across the arranged teeth. Wrong sacrifice. I gasped, my own voice returning fully for the first time in days. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The blood, my blood, the vessel's blood, touched each of the ritual teeth, creating a connection that rapidly destabilized. The air around us began to distort, reality bending inward like fabric being torn. What have you done? Collins shouted, his face contorted with rage and fear. Professor Morgan scrambled to her feet, backing away from the altar. A wind that wasn't natural howled through the clearing, whipping her gray hair around her face. Connor, she called out. I collapsed to my knees, the knife still embedded in my chest. Run, I croaked. Abby and Collins weren't running. They stood transfixed, staring at the center of the altar where a doorway was forming, not the control portal they had planned, but a chaotic tear in reality. Unnatural light poured through it, bathing them in sickly blue radiance. The vessel rejects you. I told the entity inside me, blood bubbling between my lips. Find another way home. The entity screamed, a sound of such ancient fury that the trees around us bent away as if in terror. I felt it being torn from my body, not emerging triumphantly as planned, but being ripped away violently, painfully. Professor Morgan reached me somehow, pulling me away from the altar with surprising strength. Together we stumbled down the path as the vortex grew behind us, consuming everything in its path. I looked back once. Abby and Colin stood paralyzed, their bodies elongating impossibly as they were drawn into the chaotic portal. Between the trees, partially visible, I could see it, the smiling one, a distortion in reality with that terrible two-eyed smile filled with countless teeth. It reached toward me with limbs that shouldn't exist, trapped between dimensions, unable to fully manifest. It's still there, I gasped as Professor Morgan helped me into Colin's abandoned vehicle. Still watching, waiting. Save your strength, she urged, starting the engine with shaking hands. The book, I said, clutching her arm with bloody fingers. You need to burn it. Burn my body with it when I'm gone. Scatter the ashes in running water. Her eyes filled with tears. Connor, you might survive. Promise me, I insisted, feeling life draining away. It will try again. New vessel, new cycle. She nodded finally, accelerating down the mountain road. I promise, behind us, the clearing at Northridge collapsed in on itself. Blue light shooting skyward before winking out like a dying star. The entity had been denied its full manifestation, but I knew with terrible certainty that it wasn't gone. Just thwarted. Waiting. As darkness closed around me, I hoped it would be enough. 3 months later, a new ranger arrived at the renovated cabin. The bloodstains had been removed. The hidden chamber beneath filled with concrete. The forest around it seemed peaceful again, birds singing in the spring sunshine. The young ranger set down her bags, exploring her new home with enthusiasm. A fresh start, she'd been told. The previous ranger had suffered a tragic accident. Details vague, records sealed. As she turned to unpack, something caught her eye on the windowsill. A small twig doll that hadn't been there moments before. She picked it up, examining the crude figure with curiosity, unaware of the presence watching from between the trees outside. In the gathering darkness, a figure stood motionless. Its smile stretched unnaturally wide as it watched and waited for the cycle to begin once again. I got off the bus with my bag over my shoulder and Uncle Thomas's keys poking into my palm. Blue Ridge sat between mountains that crowded too close, like they were trying to squeeze the life out of the town. Only one other person got off with me, an old woman who rushed away without looking back. The bus drove off, leaving me on the cracked sidewalk of what passed for Main Street. 3 buildings down was the sheriff's office, where Thomas's things waited. My first stop. Inside, a desk sergeant looked up from his crossword puzzle. His eyes got narrow when I said my name. Mitchell, he said, not a question. Thomas's nephew. I nodded. He went into a back room and came back with a cardboard box. Everything we collected from the scene, he said, pushing it across the counter. What exactly happened? I asked. The phone call 3 weeks back had been short on details, just that Thomas had died in what they called an accident on the mountain. The sergeant's face tightened. It's all in the report. He tapped the folder on top of the box, fell during his night shift, bad head wound, probably died right away. The way he wouldn't meet my eyes told me there was more, but he wasn't sharing. I signed where he pointed and gathered up the box. It wasn't heavy, just a leather journal, a wallet with $43, a ring of keys marked Lodge, and his watch, the sum of a life. Town's not used to outsiders, the sergeant said as I turned to leave, even family. I nodded, taking the warning for what it was. Outside, the afternoon had cooled down. People walked up and down the sidewalks, but nobody looked at me, not directly. They'd glance, then look away. Quick darting eyes that checked me out without wanting to be caught doing it. I needed supplies before heading to the cabin, so I found the general store at the end of the block. A bell jingled overhead when I walked in. 4 people stood near the counter, all turning to stare. Their conversation stopped. Help you? The man behind the register had thick hands and a gray beard. Just picking up some basics. I moved toward the grocery aisle. The whispers started before I was halfway there. Mitchell's nephew, just like him, here to stick his nose. Better hope he's smarter than his uncle was. I grabbed what I needed. Bread, eggs, coffee, a couple cans of soup. When I brought it to the counter, the man rang me up without a word. I'm Ryan Mitchell, I said, pushing my cash across the counter. Thomas was my uncle. The man counted my change with careful precision. The others had spread out to different corners of the store, suddenly interested in products they'd been ignoring. Sam Guthrie, he finally said, bagging my things. Sorry about your uncle. I waited for more, but that was it. Any chance you knew him well? I tried again. Sam shook his head. Not really. Came in for supplies now and then, kept to himself. He pushed my bag forward. Cabin's up on Mill Creek Road, last one before the forest starts proper. I took the hint and left, feeling the stairs on my back. The cabin wasn't hard to find. A dirt driveway led to a small house that needed a fresh coat of paint. Pine trees grew close on 3 sides with branches that scraped the roof when the wind blew. Inside, it smelled musty and empty. One main room worked as kitchen and living area, with a bedroom and bathroom off to the side. I put my bags down and looked around. Thomas hadn't been much for decorating. A couch faced a small TV. The kitchen table had a stack of mail and an empty coffee mug. The cabinets had the basics. Plates, cups, canned goods. It was what I found behind things that told the real story. An empty whiskey bottle behind the bread box. Another under the bathroom sink. 3 more emptied and hidden in. Bedroom closet. I knew the drill. I'd done the same thing, hiding bottles from roommates, from girlfriends, from myself. 6 months clean and seeing those bottles still made my throat tighten. On the kitchen table beneath a pile of junk mail, I found an envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter on Ravens Peak Mountain Lodge letterhead. In the event of Thomas Mitchell's death, or inability to perform his duties, the position of night watchman is offered to his next of kin, Ryan Mitchell. They'd know I would come, expected it even. The letter listed the pay, decent enough, and basic duties. Patrol the lodge from midnight to 8 a.m. Log any disturbances. Maintain security protocols. At the bottom, a handwritten note. The job is yours if you want it. Call the number. George Campbell, manager. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closer, night was falling outside the windows. I unpacked, made a simple dinner, and tried to settle in. The journal from the sheriff's box sat on the table, but I wasn't ready to read it yet. Too raw, too real. Sleep came hard in the unfamiliar bed. I dozed off sometime after midnight only to jerk awake at the sound of scratching at my window. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I lay still, listening. It could have been branches, but there was a pattern to it. 3 scratches, pause. 3 more, pause. I got up and moved to the window, part of me not wanting to look. The glass showed only my reflection against the darkness outside. I pressed my face closer, cupping my hands around my eyes. Nothing but trees and shadows. The scratching had stopped. But as I stood there, something about the forest changed. The dark spots between the trees looked deeper than before, and they seemed to move in a weird way. Almost like something was there, moving around, looking at me. I stepped back and drew the curtains closed. Sleep didn't come again that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Thomas's keys in front of me, turning the lodge key over and over in my fingers. The job offer felt too convenient, too ready, but I needed money. My savings wouldn't last long, and going back wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until I figured out what had really happened to Thomas. Come morning, I'd call the number, take the job, get a foothold in this strange closed town. It was a fresh start, at least. And after 6 months of clawing my way towards sobriety, I knew how to recognize one when I saw it. Even if this one came with weird scratching sounds and shadows that moved around at night, I grabbed the phone from the security desk and punched in the number from the letter. 3 rings, then a rough voice answered, Campbell. This is Ryan Mitchell about the night watchman position, Thomas's nephew. Good. Can you start tonight? No questions about my experience or qualifications. No mention of references or background checks. Just the assumption I'd take it. Yeah, I can start tonight. Be here at 8. I'll show you the rounds. He hung up without waiting for a response. I spent the day going through Thomas's things, looking for anything that might explain the scratching in my window or the town's strange reaction to me. His closet held work clothes. A few flannel shirts, boots worn down at the heels. The kitchen drawers had the usual junk, rubber bands, old receipts, take-out menus from places in town. In the bedroom nightstand I found a small notebook filled with times and single-word notes. 10:15, howling. 2:30, scratching. 4:45, footprints. The last entry. From 3 days before his death, read, it's getting closer. I stuck the notebook in my jacket pocket and headed out. Raven's Peak Lodge sat halfway up the mountain, a big wooden building that blended with the forest around it. The main building was 3 stories high with wings on both sides. Stone chimneys stuck up from the roof. The parking lot had only 2 cars when I got there. The front doors opened into a lobby with a high ceiling and a huge stone fireplace. Trophy heads hung on the walls, deer, elk, and one bear with glass eyes that seemed to follow me. George Campbell stood behind the reception desk. He was tall and skinny with deep lines around his mouth that made him look like he was always in a bad mood. Mitchell, he said, not offering his hand. Follow me. He led me through the lobby to a small office behind the reception desk. A bank of security monitors showed empty hallways and the dark parking lot. This is your base. You'll make rounds every hour on the hour. Check all doors and windows. Make sure everything's locked. Log anything you see in here. He tapped a thick binder on the desk. What am I looking for exactly? I asked. George's jaw tightened. Nothing. You're not looking for anything. You're making sure the lodge is secure. He handed me a ring of keys and a flashlight, then led me through the building. The main floor had the lobby, restaurant, bar, and a few meeting rooms. The second and third floors held guest rooms, all empty now. Off-season, George explained when I asked. We'll have guests starting next month. The basement was last, concrete floors, storage rooms, laundry facilities, and a boiler room. At the end of a long hallway stood a heavy metal door with 3 separate locks. This stays locked, George said, not explaining why. Always. No exceptions. What's back there? Storage. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. Just make your rounds every hour and log anything unusual. What qualifies as unusual? George's expression hardened. Nothing is unusual here. No matter what you see or hear, it's just a mountain settling or animals in the woods. Don't investigate. Don't leave the marked paths. He pointed to a map on the wall showing the lodge grounds. Red lines mark paths between buildings and around the property. Stay on these, especially at night. We returned to the security office where George checked his watch. It's 8:15. Your shift runs until 8 tomorrow morning. Questions? I had dozens, but his face told me none would be answered. No. Good. Phone's there if you need me. I live 10 minutes away. He headed for the door, then stopped. Your uncle was a good man. Reliable. Until he wasn't. Before I could ask what he meant, George was gone. I settled into the chair, watching the security monitors. The lodge creaked around me as the night got cooler. At 9, I made my first round. Everything was locked and quiet. The hours crawled by. I checked the basement twice, paying special attention to the metal door. All 3 locks remained secure. Whatever was behind it would stay there. By midnight, I noticed how quiet it was outside. No crickets, no owls, no rustling leaves, even though I could see the branches moving in the breeze. The quiet felt deliberate, like the forest was holding its breath. At 1 a.m., I heard the first odd sound. A low rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I checked the monitors. Nothing moved on any screen. My 2 a.m. round took me outside, following the marked path around the lodge's perimeter. The silence was even worse here. No night birds, no insects, not even the sound of small animals moving through the bushes. Just dead air and the crunch of gravel under my boots. I swept my flashlight across the tree line. Nothing moved, but the darkness between the trees seemed deeper than it should be, more solid somehow. Back inside I logged what I'd seen, or rather, what I hadn't seen. 2:15 a.m., complete absence of wildlife sounds, unusual silence. At 3:17 a.m. it happened. A high-pitched scream cut through the night from somewhere in the forest. Not an animal sound, too human, too desperate. It rose in pitch until it broke, then stopped abruptly. I grabbed the phone and dialed George's number. He answered on the first ring like he'd been sitting with the phone in his hand. What? His voice was alert, not the voice of someone just woken up. I heard a scream in the woods, sounded like someone in trouble. I told you, ignore it, George snapped. That's just how things are here. But if someone's hurt, no one's out there. Stay inside. Stay on the paths. Do your job. He hung up. I sat back, my chest racing. The scream had been real. I knew it. But George's quick answer, his lack of surprise, he'd heard it before, expected it even. At 4 a.m. during my rounds, I heard footsteps on the roof, heavy, clear steps that crossed from one end to the other. I checked the security monitors. The roof camera showed nothing but empty shingles and night sky. By 5 a.m., I was getting super tired. I'd been up most of the night before, and the stress had worn me out. I made coffee in the small break room and went back to the monitors. That's when I saw them. Shadows moving at the tree line. Too big to be human. Too purposeful to be tricks of the light. They moved between the trees, sometimes on 4 legs. Sometimes getting up to stand on 2. The camera's infrared couldn't quite catch them, just vague moving shapes that disappeared when I tried to look right at them. I wrote down everything, every sound, every shadow, every moment of weird quiet. Dawn came slowly, the sky changing from black to deep blue to pale gray. As the first sunlight hit the trees, I heard a sound like a deep group sigh from the forest. Then, like someone flipped a switch, birds began to sing. Squirrels made noise. The normal morning sounds filled the air. George showed up at 7:55, looking exactly as he had the night before. No messy hair, no sleepy eyes. He looked like he'd dressed in seconds. He looked at the logbook, his face getting tight as he read what I wrote. "You wrote too much," he said, closing the book. "Just note the times of your rounds and any maintenance issues. Nothing else." "I heard a scream," I said, "saw things moving in the woods." "No, you didn't." His voice was flat. "You heard the wind, saw shadows from clouds passing over the moon. That's all. There weren't any clouds last night." George stared at me, his eyes hard. "This job isn't for everyone. Your uncle understood that, eventually. You need to decide if you can handle it." "What happened to him?" "Really?" "He fell, hit his head, end of story." George picked up his keys. "Will you be back tonight?" I thought about the shadows, the scream, the footsteps on the roof, about Thomas's hidden bottles and cryptic notes, about the metal door in the basement with its 3 locks. "Yeah," I said, "I'll be back." George nodded once. 8 o'clock, don't be late." I walked back to the cabin in the morning light, too tired to drive. The forest just looked like regular trees and bushes now, nothing scary about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from just beyond the tree line. Something that had screamed in the night. Something that had walked on the roof. Something that knew I was here. I pushed through the library's heavy oak doors, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been oiled in decades. The place was empty except for a gray-haired woman behind the front desk. She wore glasses and stamped books quickly as I walked in. "Help you?" she asked without looking up. "I'm researching local history," I said. "Specifically around Ravens Peak Lodge." Her hand froze mid-stamp. She looked up at me, lips pressed into a thin line. "Town records are in the back room." She pointed to a door with flaking green paint. "Newspapers are on microfilm, history sections on the left wall." I thanked her and headed toward the back room. The space smelled of old paper and dust with metal shelving units packed tight with cardboard boxes and bound volumes. A single microfilm reader sat on a desk in the corner with a pale blue light coming from its screen. I started with the history books, pulling down anything that mentioned Blue Ridge or the surrounding mountains. Most were standard local histories. When the town was founded, who the first settlers were, how the logging industry shaped the area, nothing about strange occurrences or things in the woods. The microfilm proved more useful. I loaded spools of local newspapers, starting with the most recent and working backward. At first, nothing jumped out. Town council meetings, school events, weather reports. Then I hit 1972. 3 dead in mountain incident, the headline read. The article was frustratingly vague. 3 maintenance workers at Ravens Peak Lodge were found deceased yesterday morning. Sheriff Robert Tanner cited multiple factors in the deaths and assured residents that the situation has been contained. The lodge will remain closed for 2 weeks during investigation. No names, no cause of death, no follow-up articles in the next issues. I kept scrolling backward, the pattern emerged slowly. Every few years, a brief mention of someone gone missing. A hiker who never returned to his campsite. A hunter who went too deep into the woods. A teenager who took a dare to spend the night on the mountain. Some were found, many weren't. The librarian showed up behind me, making me jump. "We're closing in 5 minutes," she said, her eyes flicking to the screen. "Find what you needed." "Not exactly, these articles about the disappearances, they're pretty light on details." She took off her glasses, cleaning them with the bottom of her cardigan. "Small town papers report what the town needs to know." "And what about what really happened?" Her eyes narrowed. "You're Thomas Mitchell's nephew?" It wasn't a question. Yes, I'm working at the lodge now. Then you should be careful what you go looking for. She reached past me and switched off the microfilm reader. Some questions are better left unasked in Blue Ridge. I gathered my notes and headed out. The sun was setting and the mountains had dark purple shadows. My shift didn't start for another 4 hours. I needed a drink, not alcohol, I reminded myself, and maybe some food. The Timberline was the only bar in town. It had neon beer signs in the windows. Inside, the place was half full, mostly men in work clothes drinking beers at small tables. Conversation stopped when I walked in, then started again more quietly. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a club soda with lime. The bartender raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "You're Mitchell's nephew," said a voice to my left. I turned to find a man in his 50s with rough skin and work-worn hands. He sipped a beer with 3 empty glasses pushed to the side. "Word travels fast," I said. "Small town," he extended his hand. "David Wilson. I worked with your uncle a few times, logging jobs." I shook his hand. "Ryan Mitchell. Heard you took his job at the lodge." I nodded, sipping my soda. 3 nights in. And his eyes were sharp despite the empty glasses in front of him. "And what? Seen anything yet?" The question hung between us. I thought about the screams, the footsteps on the roof, the shadows at the tree line. "Maybe," I said carefully. David nodded like I confirmed something. He glanced around, then slid onto the stool next to mine. "Your uncle and I talk sometimes. Would he come in here?" David's voice dropped lower. He asked questions too about the mountain, about the things people see up there. "What kind of things?" David took a long pull from his beer. "Been here all my life. My daddy too, and his daddy before him. Some things you just grow up knowing." "Like what?" "Like staying on the paths. Like not going into certain parts of the woods after dark." He leaned closer. "Like what happens to folks who break the rules." The bartender came our way, wiping down the counter. David straightened up, falling silent until the man moved on. "Your uncle knew what was out there," he whispered once we were alone again. "We all do, been here for generations. Some call it a beast. Others say it's something older than the mountains themselves." I suddenly felt spooked, and it wasn't from the bar's AC. David looked at me. "I don't call it anything. Don't talk about it at all most times. Bad luck." "Then why are you talking to me?" He drained his beer and signaled for another. "Because you're here now. Because you took that job. And because your uncle was asking the same questions before he died." "What happened to him, really?" David accepted a fresh beer from the bartender, waiting until we were alone again. Official story as he fell, hit his head. And the unofficial story. He went looking for answers, found something else instead. David's fingers tapped nervously on his glass. "Look, I shouldn't be saying this much. Town has ways of dealing with people who talk too much. Who should I talk to then? Someone must know what's really going on." David hesitated, glancing toward the door like he was considering making a run for it. Finally, he sighed. "Ask the old man who lives by Blackwater Creek," he said. "Harold knows more than anyone. Cabin's about 3 miles up the north road where the creek bends under the big oak." "Harold who?" "Jenkins. Harold Jenkins." David stood abruptly. "I've said too much already. Just be careful up there at night. Stay on the paths. Don't go investigating strange noises." He tossed some bills on the bar and headed for the door, hunching his shoulders like someone was about to hit him. I finished my soda and paid my tab. Outside, it was completely dark now. You could see stars between the clouds, and the half-moon barely lit up the empty street. My car was parked at the end of the block. As I walked to it, it got noticeably colder. The hair on my arms stood up. Something felt off. I stopped to listen. The town was dead quiet. No cars, Nobody walking around. Just an owl hooting somewhere and leaves rustling in the wind. Then I saw it. A huge shadow ran across the road ahead way too fast for how big it was. It came and went in seconds, but I couldn't forget what I'd seen. Something big on four legs that didn't look like any normal animal. I grabbed my flashlight, turned it on and pointed it all over the road. Nothing was there. No tracks, nothing moving in the bushes on either side. But the air smelled different now, like what fur and pennies, an animal and blood together. I couldn't move, and my hand shook a little as I held the flashlight. After a whole minute of nothing, I made myself move, rushing to my car and locking the doors as soon as I got in. The engine started right away, my headlights lighting up the dark road. As I drove toward the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd seen crossing the road wasn't just passing through. It was watching. Waiting. I had a gut feeling it had been watching me ever since I got to Blue Ridge. I pulled my car onto the narrow dirt track where Blackwater Creek Road turned from pavement to gravel. The trees crowded in from both sides, branches scraping against the windows. David's directions had been simple enough. Follow the north road until the big oak where the creek bent. But in these woods, every tree looked old and tall. The road got even narrower, making me slow down to a crawl. My headlight showed a wooden bridge crossing the creek with gray worn-out planks. Past it was a small cabin with a metal roof that caught some of the afternoon light. I parked and turned off the engine. It got really quiet right away, except for the soft sound of the creek and a woodpecker tapping somewhere nearby. The cabin looked barely lived in. Smoke came from the stone chimney and there was a stack of split wood against one wall. The porch drooped a little in the middle. On that porch sat a man in a wooden rocking chair, so still I hadn't noticed him at first. He watched me without moving, hands resting on his knees. I got out of the car and approached the bridge. The old boards creaked under my weight. "You're Thomas's boy," the man said before I'd even reached the other side. His voice carried clearly across the space between us, neither raised nor strained. I stopped halfway across. "I'm his nephew, Ryan Mitchell." The man nodded like this confirmed something he already knew. "Harold Jenkins," he gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Come sit." I crossed the rest of the bridge and climbed the 3 steps to the porch. Up close, Harold looked older than I'd expected. His face had deep wrinkles and his hair was all white. But his eyes were bright as he looked me over. "How did you know who I was?" I asked, lowering myself into the chair. "You look like him, around the eyes." Harold kept rocking, the chair making a soft rhythm against the wooden boards. "And not many strangers come this way. David Wilson told me I should talk to you." Harold's mouth twitched. "David talks too much when he drinks, always has. He said you know things about the mountain." "I know many things." "Which ones are you after?" I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I've been working at the lodge for 3 nights now. I've heard screams in the forest, footsteps on the roof, seen shadows moving between the trees." Harold's rocking slowed but didn't stop. "You've been hearing it at night, haven't you?" His tone made my stomach drop. He already knew. "What is it?" I asked. Harold looked past me to the darkening forest. The sun was low in the sky and the clearing was getting dark. "The mountain has always had a keeper," he said. "Something old. Something that was here long before the first settlers cut down trees to build their homes. A beast. That's what some call it. Names don't matter much to things that old." I thought about the shadows I'd seen, the unnatural movement at the tree-line. What does it want? Same as any living thing. Territory. Food. Harold's eyes came back to mine. "The town may have packed generations ago. We stay on marked paths. Never hunt in certain areas. Leave offerings at stone markers deep in the woods." "Offerings? Like sacrifices?" Harold shook his head. "Food mostly. Sometimes tools or clothes. Things it finds useful. And in return? In return, it takes only what it needs. The implications of that hung in the air between us. I thought about the missing hikers, the dead maintenance workers, the strange silence in the forest at night. "My uncle," I said. "What happened to him?" Harold's rocking stopped completely. Thomas broke the rules, got curious about what was behind that metal door. My breath caught. The door in the basement with the 3 locks. Harold nodded, his face grim. That door was part of the original pact, a boundary line. What's behind it? Harold's eyes widened slightly. A way in. Or maybe a way out for it. The sun was getting lower. Harold looked up at the darkening sky and quickly stood up. "You need to go," he said. "It's not safe after dark." I stood too, not ready to leave. But I still don't understand. Understanding won't save you. Harold disappeared into the cabin, returning moments later with a small leather pouch. He pressed it into my hand, his fingers cold against mine. "Keep this with you. Stay on the path. Never leave the lodge during your shift." The pouch was soft, worn by years of handling. It felt heavy for its size. "What is it?" "Protection. Of a sort." Harold was already ushering me toward the steps. "Go now, and don't come back here after sunset." I stumbled down the steps, the urgency in his voice pushing me forward. At the bridge, I turned back. My uncle's journal mentioned footprints, scratching, things getting closer. What was he talking about? Harold stood at the edge of his porch, half in shadow now. The beast tests boundaries, always has. But something's changed. It's getting bolder. Why? Because the pact is weakening. Has been for years. Harold's face was deadly serious. Your uncle wasn't the first to break the rules, just the most recent. I wanted to ask more, but the sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains. The forest around us was darkening rapidly. "Go," Harold said one last time, "and remember, stay on the paths." I drove back too fast on the narrow road, looking in my rearview mirror more than at the road ahead. The trees seemed to crowd the road behind me. By the time I got back to regular pavement, I was gripping the steering wheel super tight. Back at the cabin, I locked the door and closed the curtains. I still had 3 hours before my shift at the lodge. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the leather pouch Harold had given me. Inside was a small bundle of dried herbs tied with twine. They smelled strong and weird. Under that was what looked like a tooth, yellow, curved, and way too big for any normal animal. It was as long as my thumb, with a jagged edge that shined in the light. I put the tooth on the table and looked at it. Whatever it came from would have had a mouthful of these, something that ate meat. My phone rang, making me jump. Emma's name popped up on the screen. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound normal. "Ryan, you okay?" "You sound weird." "I'm fine, just getting ready for work." "How's it going?" "The job working out?" I looked at the tooth on the table. "It's interesting." "Interesting how?" "Just different than I expected." I couldn't tell her about the screams, the shadows, the beast. She'd think I was hallucinating, that sobriety had cracked something in my brain. "How are things with you?" "Same old." "Listen, I was thinking of coming to visit next month. See this place you're settling into." "No," I said too quickly. "I mean, not yet. Let me get more established first." Silence on the line. Then, "Ryan, are you sure you're okay? You don't sound like yourself." "Just tired, new job, new schedule." I forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. "Night shifts are messing with my sleep." "If you say so." She didn't sound convinced. "Call me if you need anything, okay?" "Anytime." "I will, promise." After we hung up, I put the tooth and herbs back in the pouch and slipped it into my pocket. I ate a quick dinner, not tasting the food, then headed to the lodge for my shift. George was waiting in the security office, flipping through the previous night's log. He looked up when I entered. "You're early," he said, checking his watch. Couldn't sleep. His eyes narrowed slightly. Something on your mind? I thought about telling him I'd spoken with Harold, but something in his earlier warning made me hesitate. Just getting used to the schedule. George nodded, seemingly satisfied. Make your rounds on time tonight. We had some disturbances last night after you left. What kind of disturbances? Nothing to worry about. Just keep to the paths and log anything unusual. He headed for the door, then paused. And Mitchell? Whatever you hear tonight, stay inside. The door closed behind him before I could ask what he meant. I sat down in the chair, watching the security monitors showing empty hallways and darkened rooms. My hand kept going to the leather pouch in my pocket, fingers feeling the outline of the tooth through the soft material. At 10, I made my first round. The lodge was quiet, the empty guest rooms locked and dark. In the basement, I checked the metal door with its 3 locks, all locked up. By midnight, the usual silence had fallen outside. No crickets, no night birds, no rustling leaves, just dead air and the occasional creak of the lodge settling. At 12:17, it started. A low howl from somewhere in the forest, rising in pitch until it seemed to fill the entire night. It wasn't a wolf. Too deep, too sustained. It held for nearly 30 seconds before fading. I checked the monitors. Nothing moved on any screen. The howling came again at 1:05, closer this time. It sounded like it was coming from just beyond the tree line. I made my rounds at 1:30, staying inside as George had warned. Through the windows, I could see nothing but darkness and the vague outlines of trees. At 2:22, during my rounds, I heard scratching at the main entrance. 3 distinct scratches. A pause, then 3 more. The same pattern I heard at the cabin my first night. I walked to the door slowly, flashlight raised, the scratching stopped. Then came a soft thump, like something heavy leaning against the wood. I couldn't move, my hand tied around the leather pouch in my pocket. After a full minute of silence, I worked up the courage to look through the peephole, nothing but darkness. I returned to the security office and logged what I'd heard. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. No more howls, no more scratching. Just the feeling that something was out there, watching and waiting. When George arrived at 7:55, I was already packed up to leave. Anything to report? He asked, scanning the logbook, howling closer than before and scratching at the main entrance around 2:30. George's face remained impassive, but I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the desk. Did you go outside? No, you said to stay in. He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Good, that's good. I hesitated, then decided to take the risk. I talked to Harold Jenkins yesterday. George's head snapped up, eyes suddenly alert. What did he tell you? About the pact, the beast. What's behind the door? And you believe him? George's voice was carefully neutral. I believe something's out there. Something that killed my uncle. George was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he sighed. Harold knows things, yes. But he's not always reliable. He seemed pretty clear to me. Just be careful what you take as truth around here. George picked up the logbook. Some stories get twisted over time. I nodded, not convinced, but unwilling to push further. See you tonight. The morning air felt clean after the stale air of the lodge. I drove back to the cabin with the windows down to freshen up. The forest looked normal in daylight, just trees and bushes, nothing weird. But as I pulled up to the cabin, I spotted something on the front porch, a small dark shape. I got out to check. It was a dead rabbit with a broken neck, not torn up or bloody, just broken cleanly. Someone had placed it right in front of my door. I looked around. The clearing was empty. The forest quiet except for normal morning sounds. I picked up the rabbit by its back legs and carried it to the edge of the woods. As I tossed it into the bushes, I felt like this was a message. Or maybe a warning. Or maybe an offering. I flipped through my uncle's journal. The cover was old and smooth from use. I found it hidden behind some old incident reports in the security office filing cabinet, not where it should have been with his other stuff. Someone had put it there on purpose. The first entries were pretty normal. Weather notes, maintenance issues, quick mentions of wildlife he saw during night rounds. March 3rd, quiet night, fixed loose railing on east staircase. Raccoon got into the dumpster again. March 7th, heavy rain. Leak in lobby ceiling near fireplace. Left note for maintenance. But around mid-April, the writing changed. April 16th, heard something in the basement tonight. Not pipes, not settling. Like whispers. Checked 3 times. Nothing there. April 22nd, footprints outside the east entrance. Too big for a person. Not shaped right for a bear. George says I'm seeing things. I turned the page, forgetting about my coffee getting cold next to me. The handwriting got messy as the entries went on, with neat lines turning into slanted writing that sometimes cut into the paper. May 3rd. They're watching me from the trees. I can see their eyes reflecting my flashlight. Not animals. They don't move right. May 10th. Found scratches on the basement door. 3 sets, always 3. George says it's nothing. He's lying. May 17th. It knows when I'm alone. It waits until I'm alone. The final pages had broken thoughts, with some sentences stopping halfway. Others pushed so hard into the paper they almost broke through. May 30th. Can't sleep. It's scratching at my windows at home now. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. June section. Harold knows. He's always known. Says I need to stay on the paths. Too late for that. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. June 5th. It's not what they say it is. Not a beast. Something worse. It wears faces. It knows things. I closed the journal, my hand shaking a bit. The security office felt cramped now. The monitor showed empty hallways, vacant rooms. In the quiet forest beyond the lodge's walls. Everything looked normal. Nothing was. My watch showed 1:47 a.m. time for another round. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, putting the journal in my jacket pocket. The lodge made creaking sounds as I walked the main floor, the usual noises of an old building. Nothing weird in the lobby, nothing in the restaurant or meeting rooms. The basement was last, like always. I hated going down there, especially after reading the journal. The stairs made noise under my weight as it got colder with each step. The bare bulbs made yellow spots of light that didn't reach the corners. I was halfway down the hallway when I saw them. Muddy footprints coming from the utility entrance. They went straight to the metal door with its 3 locks. I followed slowly, keeping my flashlight on the prints. They weren't human. Too large, weirdly shaped, with what looked like claw marks at the edges. Not bear tracks either. Nothing I knew. The trail ended at the door. The locks were fine, but the metal had fresh scratches, 3 parallel lines deep enough to cut the steel. I touched them, feeling the rough edges. Something had tried to get in. Or out. My radio made a crackling noise, making me jump. Mitchell? You there? George's voice tight with tension. I keyed the mic. Yeah, in the basement. A pause. Stay there. I waited, listening to the heating system running and my own breathing. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard the security door upstairs slam open and footsteps pounding down the stairs. George appeared at the end of the hallway, still buttoning his flannel shirt, hair sticking up on one side. He looked like he'd dressed in seconds. What did you see? He demanded, striding toward me. I pointed at the footprints. These weren't here during my midnight round. George stared at the tracks, then at the scratched door. His face went slack for a moment before turning into something between anger and fear. You need to forget what you saw, he said, pushing past me to a supply closet. He pulled out a mop and bucket. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning up." He filled the bucket at a utility sink, sloshing water onto his shoes in his haste. "Shouldn't we document this?" "Call someone." "No." The word came out sharp as a slap. George began mopping the mud, erasing the prints with quick, aggressive strokes. "This isn't something we report." I pulled the journal from my pocket. "My uncle saw things too. Wrote about them." George's hands froze on the mop handle. "Where did you get that?" "Found it in the filing cabinet." "Someone hid it." "Give it to me." He held out his hand, water dripping from his fingers onto the concrete floor. I stepped back, keeping the journal. "It's my uncle's. Belongs to me now." George's jaw worked, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Your uncle couldn't let it go. And look what happened." "What did happen?" "Because I'm starting to think he didn't just fall." George resumed mopping, his movements jerky. "Some things are better left alone, Mitchell. This town has ways of dealing with problems. Has for generations. Harold Jenkins told me about the pact." The mop clattered to the floor. George's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might pass out. "Stay away from him," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "He's not right in the head. He seemed pretty clear to me. Told me about the beast, the offerings, the boundaries." George picked up the mop, his hands shaking slightly. "Harold Jenkins is dangerous. He knows things, yes, but he's not what you think." "What is he then?" "Just stay away from him." George finished cleaning the mud, then wrung out the mop with more force than necessary. "And stay on the paths, always on the paths." He gathered his cleaning supplies and headed for the stairs, then paused, looking back at me. "You're a lot like your uncle. Curious, stubborn. He couldn't stop digging either." "Is that why he died?" George's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something like pity there. "Finish your shift, Mitchell. Lock up when you leave. And for God's sake, stay inside." After he left, I stood alone in the basement corridor, staring at the now clean floor and the scratched door. The journal felt heavy in my pocket. I finished my rounds and returned to the security office. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. I logged the incident in careful, neutral language. Mud tracked in from utility entrance, cleaned by manager. At 4:17 a.m., I heard it, a child crying outside. The sound was faint at first, just on the edge of hearing a soft, hiccuping sob that might have been the wind, but it came again clearer, this time unmistakable. I checked the monitors. The exterior camera showed nothing but empty grounds and dark trees. The crying continued, rising and falling like real distress. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, hesitating at the door. George's warning came back to me, stay inside, but it was a child, a lost, frightened child. Keyed my radio. "George, you there?" Static answered me. I tried again. Nothing. The crying grew louder, more desperate. I made my decision, unlocking the main entrance and stepping outside. The night air hit me like a wall, cold and damp. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the empty parking lot to the tree line beyond. There, a small figure at the edge of the woods, child's side, standing perfectly still. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding thin in the vast silence. "Are you okay?" The crying stopped. The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, then another. "It's all right, I'm here to help." The figure backed away, disappearing between the trees. "Wait." I moved faster, following the small shape as it withdrew deeper into the forest. My flashlight caught glimpses, a pale arm, the back of a head, small feet moving between fallen logs. I pushed through branches, stumbling over roots. The lodge lights got farther away behind me. The child stayed just ahead, always visible but never quite reachable. "Please stop, I won't hurt you." The figure stopped in a small clearing with their back to me. I felt so relieved as I walked up. Hey there, are you lost? Let me help you get. I stopped mid-sentence as my flashlight beam went across the ground. There was no path beneath my feet, just wild forest floor untouched by human traffic. I'd left the path. I felt sick with shock. Harold's warning, George's insistence. Stay on the paths. The crying stopped. Everything went quiet, making my ears feel stuffed. Not even insects made noise in the darkness. Slowly, the small figure turned. Before I could see its face, a low growl rumbled through the clearing. Not from the child shape, but from everywhere at once. From the trees, the ground, the air itself. It shook my chest and made my teeth rattle. I backed away, my flashlight jumping wildly across the trees. Shadows moved between the trunks. Huge. Liquid shapes that seemed to flow instead of walk. More growls joined the first, making a circle of sound around me. The child figure stood completely still now. My flashlight caught its face for just a moment. Blank, expressionless, with eyes that bounced the light back at me. I turned and ran, smashing through bushes, branches, slapping my face. Behind me the growling got louder, closer. I could hear heavy movement in the forest, the snap of branches breaking under heavy weight. I saw the lodge lights through the trees and pushed harder, my lungs burning. The building seemed so far away. Something brushed my back, not quite touching, but close enough to feel its heat. I didn't look back. Couldn't look back. The edge of the forest was just ahead. 3 more strides and I burst from the tree line, stumbling across open ground toward the lodge entrance. I slammed into the door, fumbling with my keys, dropping them once before managing to jam the right one into the lock. As I pushed inside, I risked one quick look back. The forest wasn't moving. No sound, no motion, no sign of the child or whatever had chased me. But at the exact edge of the trees where forest met clear ground stood Harold Jenkins. He raised one hand in what might have been a hello or a warning. Then he turned and walked into the darkness, vanishing between the trees as if he belonged there. I locked the door, my hand shaking so bad I had to try twice. Back in the security office, I collapsed into the chair, breathing hard and fast. The monitor showed nothing unusual, just empty grounds, dark forest, as if nothing had happened. I pulled out my uncle's journal and opened to the last page, reading his final words again. It's not what they say it is. Not a beast. Something worse. It wears faces. It knows things. Outside, the forest waited, and somewhere deep inside it, something that could look like a child, watched the lodge with patient, hungry eyes. I picked up the rifle from the floor where I dropped it, my hands still shaking. The tunnel was right there in the concrete wall where the metal door had been locked for decades. The air coming out of it smelled weird, damp and metallic like old pennies left in rain. My flashlight showed the first few yards of the rocky tunnel before it got too dark to see. Footprints were in the dirt floor, the same odd-clawed prints I'd seen leading to the door earlier, but these went in, not out. I keyed my radio. George? The basement door is open. Static answered me. George, do you copy? Nothing. The smart move would be to back away, lock up the lodge and run. But the image of that child figure at the tree line kept flashing through my mind. Whatever had lured me into the woods last night was connected to this tunnel and maybe to my uncle's death. I checked the rifle-loaded safety off. My uncle had taught me to shoot when I was 12. I hadn't held a gun since getting sober. The weight of it felt both weird and normal in my hands. I stepped into the tunnel. The darkness got thicker around me. My flashlight seemed to dim the farther I went, barely cutting through the heavy air. The passage sloped downward, curving gently to the right. The walls changed from concrete to rough stone. Water dripped somewhere ahead, each splash bouncing back to me. The temperature dropped with every step. My breath fogged in front of my face. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I heard it. A soft scraping sound like nails on stone. I froze, listening. It came again, farther ahead. Then silence. Hello? My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the stone around me. No answer. just the steady drip of water. I continued forward, rifle raised now. The tunnel got a bit wider. The ceiling higher until my light couldn't reach it. The air felt heavier here, making it harder to breathe. The memory of waking up in the woods that morning came back to me. Dirt under my fingernails, leaves in my hair. No idea how I got in there. The last thing I remembered was running from whatever had chased me in the forest, seeing Harold at the tree, then locking myself in the lodge. The next thing I knew, I was lying face down in the dirt half a mile from the lodge as dawn broke through the trees. George and the others had been waiting when I stumbled back. Their trucks parked in a half circle at the entrance. Their faces had been grim, accusing. "You left the path," George had said, his voice flat. "We can't protect you now." I tried to explain about the child, the crying, how I'd only been trying to help. They gave each other looks I couldn't understand. "There are no children at the lodge," George had said. "Never have been." I pushed the memory away, focusing on the tunnel ahead. The passage got wider, opening into what seemed like a bigger space. My light couldn't reach far enough to see walls or ceiling. I stepped forward and my boot hit something solid. I aimed my flashlight down. A stone marker stood at my feet. Waist high and crudely carved. Symbols I didn't understand were all over its surface. Spirals, jagged lines, shapes that might have been eyes or mouths. The stone was dark with age and something that looked like dried blood. I moved my light around and saw more markers making a rough circle. In the middle of that circle stood a figure. "Harold?" My voice cracked on the name. He stood with his back to me, head bowed as if in prayer or concentration. He didn't turn at my voice. "Harold, what is this place?" "I tried to warn you," he said, his voice oddly flat. "The beast has chosen you as its new keeper." "What are you talking about?" I kept the rifle ready, something in his posture setting off alarms in my head. "The pact is broken. You broke it when you left the pact." Harold's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. "Now someone has to take my place." "Your place?" Harold turned slowly. His face was wrong. Skin stretched too tight across the bones, eyes black from corner to corner. When he smiled, his mouth opened too wide. "I've been the keeper for so long," he said, his voice distorting, holding it back, feeding it just enough to keep it satisfied. "But I'm tired, Ryan. So tired." I raised the rifle. "What are you?" "I'm Harold Jenkins. I'm what's left of him." The thing wearing Harold's face took a step toward me. "I made the pact 100 years ago to save this town. Bound myself to the beast to keep it contained." Another step. I backed up, keeping the distance between us. "Stay back. You don't understand yet." Harold's face twisted in what might have been sadness. "But you will. The beast has marked you. It wants you now." "The beast? That thing in the woods?" Harold laughed, and it sounded creepy and sick. "What you saw in the woods was just a fragment. A piece it sends out to hunt. The real beast is much worse." My back hit stone. I'd reached the edge of the chamber. "The girl you saw wasn't real," Harold continued, still advancing. "Just bait. The beast wears faces to lure its prey. It knows what you fear, what you want, what you'll follow into the dark." I thought of the kid at the edge of the forest, its empty face and reflective eyes, the way it had stood frozen, watching me run. "My uncle," I said. "Did he come down here too?" "Thomas found this place, yes. He was curious, like you." Harold was close enough now that I could smell him, a musty, wrong smell, like wet earth and decay. "He wasn't suitable, too broken already. The beast needs someone stronger." I raised the rifle higher. "Don't come any closer." Harold stopped, his black eyes locked on mine. "You can't stop what's happening, Ryan. The beast has picked you. It's already inside you. That's how you ended up in the woods this morning. It's testing you. Seeing if you'll fit. Fit for what? To be its new keeper. Harold spread his arms. To take my place. I saw movement behind him, something moving in the darkness beyond my flashlight's reach, something big. What happens if I refuse? Harold's too wide smile returned. Then the beast takes the town, all of it. The pact will be broken completely. My finger got tighter on the trigger. And if I kill you? Then you've removed the last barrier holding it back. Harold took another step forward. I am the lock on its cage, Ryan. Kill me and you set it free. The movement behind him got bigger, a huge dark shape rising from the cavern floor. I couldn't see what it was, just something big and long that hurt to look at. I had seconds to decide. Harold kept coming. His face changing into something that didn't look human anymore with each step. I fired. The shot was super loud in the small space. Harold stumbled backward, blood spreading across his chest. He looked down at the wound like he was a little surprised. "You fool," he gasped, dropping to his knees. I was the only thing keeping it contained. I moved up carefully, still pointing my rifle. Harold fell onto his back with blood forming a puddle under him. "The beast isn't what you think," he wheezed, grabbing my ankle with surprising strength. "It's been hiding as the girl you saw. Now there's nothing stopping it." His grip loosened. As I watched, his body got old fast. Skin wrinkled, hair turned white, flesh sank against bone. His black eyes turned milky white, then clouded over. The ground started shaking. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling. The shadow behind Harold's body grew bigger, filling the chamber. I ran. The tunnel seemed longer going back, bending in ways I didn't remember. The shaking got worse, the walls cracking around me. I tripped twice, catching myself on the rough stone. Behind me, something howled. A sound too big for the tunnel, too big for the mountain itself. It chased me upward, pushing at my back. I burst through the metal door into the basement corridor. The lights were flickering, the building making creaking noises around me. I sprinted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. The main floor was a mess. Furniture knocked over, windows cracked. I ran for the entrance, not stopping to grab anything from the security office. Outside, the night was full of noise and movement. Car engines revved, people shouted. Headlights cut through the darkness as vehicles pulled away from homes. The town was leaving. I ran to my car, threw the rifle in the back seat and sped out of the parking lot. The road into town was packed with cars and trucks all heading in the opposite direction, away from Blue Ridge. Main Street was crazy. People loaded vehicles with whatever they could carry. Children cried. A fire had started in one of the storefronts, with orange flames reaching into the night sky. I spotted David Wilson directing traffic at an intersection. I pulled over and jumped out. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. David looked really serious. "You killed him, didn't you?" It wasn't really a question. Harold was our protection. He made the original pact 100 years ago. Now it's free. I didn't know. Doesn't matter now. David pointed down the road. "Get out while you can. It's coming." I got back in my car and followed the stream of vehicles heading out of town. We made it 3 miles before hitting a roadblock. A massive tree had fallen across the highway, blocking both lanes. I turned around, trying another route. Same story. A washout had taken out the bridge over Blackwater Creek. The storm that blew in was flooding low areas, cutting off escape routes. After the third blocked road, I gave up and headed back to my uncle's cabin. The town was half empty now. Those who couldn't get out were either locking themselves in their homes or gathering at the church whose light shone in the darkness. I pulled up to the cabin and sat in the car, engine idling. The rifle lay on the back seat, useless now. I'd killed Harold thinking I was protecting myself. Instead, I'd broken the last seal holding back whatever lived under the mountain. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Ryan, I've been trying to reach you for hours." Her voice was tight with worry. I'm okay, I lied. Just been busy. You don't sound okay. What's going on? I watched lightning flash over the mountains. The storm was getting worse. Nothing. Everything's fine. Ryan, please. Talk to me. I'm worried about you. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the steering wheel. I think I made a mistake coming here, Em. Then come home. Just get in your car and drive. I'll meet you halfway. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I killed a man tonight. Because I set something free that should have stayed locked away. Because every road out of town is blocked. I just need to figure some things out first. I said instead. Ryan, you're scaring me. This doesn't sound like you. I'm fine, really. I forced a steadiness into my voice. I didn't feel. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Promise? Promise. I ended the call and got out of the car. The wind had picked up, bending the trees at the edge of the clearing. I unlocked the cabin door and stepped inside, locking it behind me. The cabin felt different now, smaller, more vulnerable. I checked all the windows, drawing the curtains tight. I brought in the rifle and loaded a fresh round into the chamber. From my window I could see movement in the forest. Trees swaying against the wind as if pushed aside by something large moving between them. Even though it was summer, the air inside the cabin turned so cold I could see my breath. I sat at the kitchen table, rifle across my lap, and waited for whatever was coming. I grabbed the rifle from the floor where I dropped it, my hands still shaking. The tunnel was in front of me, a dark opening in the concrete wall where the metal door had been locked for decades. The air coming from it smelled wrong, damp and metallic like old pennies left in rain. My flashlight showed the first few yards of rocky passage before the darkness took over. Footprints marked the dirt floor, the same odd-clawed prints I'd seen leading to the door earlier. But these went in, not out. I keyed my radio. George? The basement door is open. Static answered me. George, do you copy? Nothing. The smart move would be to back away, lock up the lodge, and run. But the image of that child figure at the tree-line kept flashing through my mind. Whatever had lured me into the woods last night was connected to this tunnel. And maybe to my uncle's death. I checked the rifle, loaded, safety off. My uncle had taught me to shoot when I was 12. I hadn't held a gun since getting sober. The weight of it both odd and strange in my hands. I stepped into the tunnel. The darkness surrounded me completely. My flashlight seemed to dim the farther I went, barely cutting through the thick air. The passage sloped downward, curving gently to the right. The walls changed from poured concrete to rough stone, as if the builders had started with modern materials but given up as they dug deeper. Water dripped somewhere ahead, each splash bouncing back to me. The temperature dropped with every step. My breath fogged in front of my face. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like nails on stone. I froze, listening. It came again, farther ahead. Then silence. Hello? My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the stone around me. No answer, just a steady drip of water. I continued forward. Rifle raised now, the tunnel got a bit wider, the ceiling going up so high my light couldn't reach it. The air felt heavier here, making it harder to breathe. I remembered waking up in the woods that morning. Dirt under my fingernails, leaves in my hair. No idea how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remembered was running from whatever had chased me in the forest, seeing Harold at the tree-line, then locking myself in the lodge. The next thing I knew, I was lying face down in the dirt half a mile from the lodge as the sun came up. George and the others had been waiting when I stumbled back. Their trucks parked in a half circle at the entrance. Their faces had been grim, accusing. You left the path, George had said, his voice flat. We can't protect you now. I tried to explain about the child, the crying, how I'd only been trying to help. They'd exchanged looks I couldn't read. There are no children at the lodge, George had said. Never have been. I pushed the memory away, focusing on the tunnel ahead. The passage got wider, opening into what felt like a bigger space. My light couldn't reach far enough to see walls or ceiling. I stepped forward and my boot hit something solid. I pointed my flashlight down. A stone marker stood at my feet, waist high and crudely cut. Weird symbols covered its surface, spirals, jagged lines, shapes that looked like eyes or mouths. The stone was darkened over time and had something that looked like dried blood. I moved my light around and saw more markers making a rough circle. In the middle of that circle stood a figure. Harold? My voice cracked on the name. He stood with his back to me, head bowed as if in prayer or concentration. Your place. Harold turned slowly. His face looked off, skin pulled too tight across the bones, eyes black from corner to corner. When he smiled, his mouth opened way too wide. I've been the keeper for so long, he said, his voice distorting, holding it back, feeding it just enough to keep it satisfied. But I'm tired, Ryan. So tired. I raised the rifle. What are you? I'm Harold Jenkins. I'm what's left of him. The thing wearing Harold's face took a step toward me. I made the pact 100 years ago to save this town. Bound myself to the beast to keep it contained. Another step. I backed up, keeping the distance between us. Stay back. You don't understand yet. Harold's face twisted in what might have been sadness. But you will. The beast has marked you. It wants you now. The beast. That thing in the woods? Harold laughed, making a gross, wet sound that bounced around the room. What you saw in the woods was just a fragment, a piece it sends out to hunt. The real beast is much worse. My back hit stone. I'd reached the edge of the chamber. The girl you saw wasn't real. Harold continued, still advancing. Just bait. The beast wears faces to lure its prey. It knows what you fear, what you want, what you'll follow into the dark. I thought of the child figure at the tree line. Its blank face and mirror eyes. The way it had stood so still, watching me run. My uncle, I said. Did he come down here too? Thomas found this place, yes. He was curious, like you. Harold was close enough now that I could smell him. A musty, wrong smell, like wet earth and decay. He wasn't suitable. Too broken already. The beast needs someone stronger. I raised the rifle higher. Don't come any closer. Harold stopped, looking right at me. You can't stop what's happening, Ryan. The beast has chosen you. It's already inside you. That's how you ended up in the woods this morning. It's testing you, seeing if you'll fit. Fit for what? To be its new keeper, Harold spread his arms. To take my place. I saw movement behind him. Something moving in the darkness beyond my flashlights reached something large. What happens if I refuse? Harold's too wide smile returned. Then the beast takes the town. All of it. The pact will be broken completely. My finger tightened on the trigger. And if I kill you? Then you've removed the last barrier holding it back. Harold took another step forward. I am the lock on its cage, Ryan. Kill me, and you set it free. The movement behind him got bigger, a huge shadow rising from the cave floor. I couldn't really see what it was, just something big and wrong that hurt my eyes to look at. I only had a few seconds to decide. Harold kept coming toward me, his face looking less human with every step. I fired. The shot was crazy loud in the cave. Harold stumbled backward, blood spreading across his shirt. He looked down at the wound, seeming a little surprised. You fool! He gasped, dropping to his knees. I was the only thing keeping it contained. I walked up slowly, rifle still raised. Harold fell onto his back with blood pooling beneath him. The beast isn't what you think, he wheezed, grabbing my ankle with surprising strength. It's been hiding as the girl you saw. Now there's nothing stopping it. His grip loosened. I watched his body get old, super fast. His skin got wrinkly, hair turned white, and his face sunk in. His black eyes turned milky white, then went completely cloudy. The ground began to shake. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. The shadow behind Harold's body grew, taking up the whole chamber. I ran. The tunnel felt longer going back, and it bent in ways I didn't remember. The shaking got worse, with walls cracking around me. I fell twice, catching myself on the stone walls. Behind me, something howled. A sound too big for the tunnel, too big for the mountain itself. It chased me upward, pushing at my back like a real thing. I burst through the metal door into the basement corridor. The lights were flickering and the building made creaking noises around me. I sprinted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. The main floor was a mess. Furniture flipped over. Windows cracked. I ran for the entrance, not stopping to grab anything from the security office. Outside, there was noise and movement everywhere. Car engines roared. People yelled. Headlights shined through the dark as vehicles drove away from homes. The town was evacuating. I ran to my car, threw the rifle in the back seat and sped out of the parking lot. The road into town was packed with cars and trucks, all going the opposite way, away from Blue Ridge. Main Street was a mess. People loaded vehicles with whatever they could carry. Children cried. A fire had started in one of the storefronts, with orange flames burning into the night sky. I saw David Wilson directing traffic at an intersection. I pulled over and jumped out. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. David's face was grim. "You killed him, didn't you?" It wasn't really a question. Harold was our protection. He made the original pact 100 years ago. Now it's free. I didn't know. Doesn't matter now. David pointed down the road. "Get out while you can. It's coming." I got back in my car and followed the stream of vehicles heading out of town. We made it 3 miles before hitting a roadblock. A massive tree had fallen across the highway, blocking both lanes. I turned around, trying another route. Same story. A washout had taken out the bridge over Blackwater Creek. The sudden storm that had blown in was flooding low areas, cutting off escape routes. After the third blocked road, I gave up and headed back to my uncle's cabin. The town was half empty now. Those who couldn't get up barricading themselves in their homes were gathering at the church whose lights lit up the darkness. I pulled up to the cabin and sat in the car, engine idling. The rifle lay on the back seat, useless now. I'd killed Harold thinking I was protecting myself. Instead, I'd broken the last seal holding back whatever lived under the mountain. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Ryan, I've been trying to reach you for hours." Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm okay." I lied. "Just been busy." "You don't sound okay. What's going on?" I watched lightning flash over the mountains. The storm was getting worse. "Nothing. Everything's fine. Ryan, please. Talk to me. I'm worried about you." I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the steering wheel. "I think I made a mistake coming here, Em. Then come home. Just get in your car and drive. I'll meet you halfway." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I killed a man tonight. Because I set something free that should have stayed locked away. Because every road out of town is blocked. I just need to figure some things out first." I said instead. "Ryan, you're scaring me. This doesn't sound like you." "I'm fine." "Really?" I forced a steadiness into my voice I didn't feel. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Promise?" "Promise." I ended the call and got out of the car. The wind had picked up, bending the trees at the edge of the clearing. I unlocked the cabin door and stepped inside, locking it behind me. The cabin seemed tiny now, and I felt exposed. I checked all the windows, drawing the curtains tight. I brought in the rifle and loaded a fresh round into the chamber. From my window, I saw the trees moving in the forest, not just from the wind, but like something big was pushing through them. It was summer, but the air was freezing cold. I could see my breath inside the cabin. I sat at the kitchen table, rifle across my lap, and waited for whatever was coming. The wind got stronger outside, shaking the windows. I checked my watch just past midnight. The storm came in quick, way too fast and strong. I tried the radio, static, the TV, nothing but snow. My phone had one bar that kept coming and going. Through the window I saw the last few cars in town driving to the church. Their lights showed the empty streets for a second before going dark again. People who couldn't get out were sticking together, maybe for safety, or maybe nobody wanted to die alone. I stayed put. Whatever was out there had been watching me since I arrived. It knew where I was. Running wouldn't help. A crash from outside made me run to the window. A pine tree had fallen across the road, snapped clean through. Not from lightning, something had pushed it over. The trees at the edge of the forest moved the wrong way, like something big was pushing through them. I moved away from the window, gripping the rifle tighter. The cabin felt really thin right now, like it couldn't keep out what was outside. My breath came out foggy. The temperature dropped at least 20 degrees in the last hour. I could see frost forming on the inside of the windows. And it was July. I needed to think, to figure out what I was dealing with. Harold told me the beast wasn't what I thought. It had been hiding as the girl I saw in the woods. It wore faces. It knew what I wanted. My uncle must have learned something. He'd been here longer, had time to look around. I'd searched the cabin when I first got here, but only found hidden bottles. Thomas was careful, though. If he found something important, he wouldn't leave it out. I ran my hand along the bottom of the kitchen table, checking for taped stuff or notes. Nothing. I checked behind the drawers, under the mattress, behind the bathroom mirror. Still nothing. The floorboards made noise as I walked to the bedroom. I stopped to listen. One board near the bed sounded different, hollow. I knelt down and pushed on it. The board moved a little. I got my fingers in the edge and pulled. The board came up easy, showing a small space underneath. A manila envelope was in the dust, sealed with tape. I grabbed it and went back to the kitchen table, keeping the rifle nearby. Inside the envelope was a bunch of papers, notes in my uncle's handwriting, newspaper clippings, and rough drawings. I spread them out on the table, using my flashlight to see better. The top sheet was dated 3 weeks before Thomas died. It's not a beast, not in the way we understand. It exists between places, our world, and somewhere else. The door in the basement is an anchor point, a way for it to reach through. Harold knows more than he's saying. He's connected to it somehow, bound to it. The next page had a drawing of the stone markers I'd seen in the underground chamber, with notes about where they were and the symbols carved into them. The symbols form a binding circle. Old magic, the kind that requires blood to work. Harold's blood or someone else's. I went through more pages. Thomas had been working hard in his final weeks, figuring out the history of Blue Ridge and the thing that lived under the mountain. 1923, first documented pact with the beast. 7 people disappeared that year. Town records show Harold Jenkins arrived the same year. Coincidence? 1972, 3 maintenance workers found dead at the lodge. All 3 had been checking out noises in the basement. All 3 had broken the rules about staying on paths. 1998, lodge closed for 6 months after structural damage. Reopened with new basement door and 3 locks. George Campbell became manager the same year. The next page made my stomach drop. It feeds on fear. On desperation. On the kind of emptiness that drives people to places like Blue Ridge in the first place. People like me. People with nowhere else to go. I thought about why I came here. 6 months sober, running from a life I'd wrecked, hoping to start over. the same desperation my uncle had felt. The final page was dated just 2 days before Thomas died. I know how to end this. The beast is tied to the door, to the stone markers, to Harold. Break one link in the chain and the whole thing falls apart. I'm going down there tonight. If I don't come back, burn everything. The cabin, the lodge. All of it. Fire is the only thing it fears. I put the papers down. I was shaking. Thomas had gone down to the chamber just like I had. But unlike me, he hadn't killed Harold. Something else had happened. A sound from outside brought me back. A soft thump on the porch steps. Then another. Someone walking, taking their time. I grabbed the rifle and moved to the door, staying to the side of the window. The footsteps stopped at the door. Silence. Then 3 soft scratches on the wood. I held my breath, waiting. 3 more scratches. Then a voice. Ryan? Are you in there? Emma's voice. My sister's voice. But that was impossible. Emma was states away. I'd just spoken to her on the phone. Ryan, please. I drove all night to get here. Let me in. I moved to the peephole and looked out. Emma stood on the porch soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face. She looked exactly like my sister. The same worried expression she always wore when dealing with me, the same way of hugging herself against the cold. I was so worried after our call, she said, looking directly at the peephole as if she could see me. You didn't sound right. I had to come. I backed away from the door. This wasn't possible. Even if Emma had left immediately after our call, she couldn't have made it here this fast. And how would she have gotten through the blocked roads? Let me in, Ryan. Not Emma called, her voice changing subtly. I can help you. The scratching returned, harder now. 3 scratches. Pause. 3 more. Ryan, please, it's cold out here. I backed further into the cabin, mind racing. The beast wears faces. It knows what you fear, what you want, what you'll follow into the dark. The scratching became pounding, the whole door shaking in its frame. The windows rattled. Something heavy slammed against the side of the cabin, making the walls creak. Let me in, Ryan. The voice wasn't Emma's anymore. It was deeper, distorted, like several voices speaking at once. I needed a plan. The beast wanted in. It wanted me. Harold had said it had chosen me as its new keeper. My uncle's final note kept playing over and over in my head. Fire is the only thing it fears. I looked around the cabin. There was a gas can in the corner by the back door, for the generator, I assumed. And under the sink, I found what I was looking for, a bottle of lighter fluid for the grill. The pounding at the door grew more intense. Wood splintered around the hinges. It wouldn't hold much longer. I worked quickly, pouring gas along the walls, over the furniture, across the floor. The fumes made my eyes water, but I kept going until the can was empty. Then I added the lighter fluid, making sure to create a path from the back door to the front. As I worked, I kept my phone in my pocket. When I finished, I took it out and typed a quick email to Emma, my real sister, not the thing outside pretending to be her. I explained everything, the beast, the pact, what I'd learned from Harold and my uncle's notes. I told her I loved her, and that I was sorry for all the worry I'd caused her over the years. I hit send just as the front door gave way with a crash of splintering wood. The thing that stepped through the doorway wore Emma's face, but the resemblance ended there. Its body was wrong, too tall, too thin. Joints bending in impossible ways. Its skin stretched and moved as if something underneath was trying to get out. Ryan, it said, Emma's voice coming from a mouth that smiled too widely. I've been waiting for you. I backed toward the kitchen, keeping the table between us. What do you want from me? The same thing I wanted from Harold. The same thing I've wanted for 100 years. It took another step inside. Its movements jerky and unnatural. A keeper. A vessel. Someone to hold me so I don't have to go back to the dark. And if I refuse, then I take the town, all of it. Every soul that couldn't escape. Its smile widened further, splitting Emma's face in a way that made my stomach turn. Starting with you, it lunged forward with impossible speed, clearing the table in a single bound. I stumbled back, digging in my pocket for the matches I'd grabbed from the drawer. Its hand, no longer Emma's hand, but something with too many joints and long bent fingers, grabbed my shirt, pulling me close. Its face changed, features melting and reshaping into something that looked like my uncle. Thomas wasn't strong enough, it said in my uncle's voice, but you are. You can end this, Ryan, just like he tried to. I struck the match and dropped it. The gas ignited with a whoosh, flames racing along the path I created. The thing wearing my uncle's face screamed, a sound no human throat could make, and released me. I scrambled toward the back door as fire climbed the walls and licked across the ceiling, heat pressed against my back as I reached for the door handle. The beast howled behind me, its body changing and twisting as flames engulfed it. The cabin groaned as support beams began to give way. I had one chance, one moment to decide. I could run, escape through the back door and leave the beast trapped in the burning cabin. Or I could stay, make sure it couldn't escape, even if it meant going down with it. Thomas had tried to end this. Harold had contained it for decades. Now it was my turn. I turned back toward the beast. It writhed in the flames, its body changing rapidly between faces I recognized. Emma, Thomas, Harold, the child from the woods, even my own face, twisted in pain and rage. It ends with me, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to the beast or to myself. The roof started to cave in, burning wood falling down around us. The beast screamed with rage so loud it shook the mountains, drowning out even the roaring fire. Smoke got in my lungs. The heat burned my skin. I didn't move as the cabin burned around us. I watched the beast's stolen faces melt off, showing something underneath I couldn't make sense of. Something really old, hungry, and scared. Before the smoke made me blind, I saw its real eyes. Too many to count. Shiny and black, with our fire reflected in them as it burned us both up.